Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the 16th anniversary celebration stream for Empire at War Expanded. We are going to be going over our favorite lovable modding memories of the last 16 years while showing off a ton of stuff coming up in the next series of updates for all of our mods. I am Corey, and joining me is about half the team right now of the last few years. So I'm not going to go through and introduce everyone individually. That's going to be boring. But we've got a bunch of preview videos to show off today. We've got a bunch of models, textures, maps, everything you could possibly wish for in Empire at War and in Sins. Actually, there's going to be some Sin stuff coming later. So long-awaited news about Ascendancy for all 10 of you who remember it. But how is everyone else doing in the call? Can you all talk at the same time, please?
Rattle.
That was underwhelming.
Good.
Ask and you shall receive.
So Oz is in chat, but he didn't even join the call. Wow. He chose chat over us.
Wow.
That's ridiculous. All right, well, before we get into the previews, it's probably good if you all know what you're going to be seeing previews for. So I will probably start off with a handy preview of what's to come in Point 3. So for all the stuff you see today, they will be shown off individually and separately later on. So a lot of this is just early teasers for a lot of it. The videos will all be posted in standalone form over the next couple weeks. So if you happen to miss some of this stream, you can come back and watch all of it. It'll all be available. Or you can wait for it to show up between a year and a month from now. So let's see, how does this work? I don't have a production team, so it's just me. It's just me. All right. The Point 2 release cycle of Empire at War Expanded is behind us, and we are well underway in working on the next big set of updates for the mods. While there will be other news posts and videos focusing on specific elements of the update as we go, and this video will be going over broad areas where we'll be focusing for the Point 3 release cycle for our next releases of Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge, as well as the first release of our Old Republic era mod, Revan's Revenge. Imperial Reign, our Galactic Civil War mod, will not be releasing in the Point 3 cycle, but there may be some news about it coming up in the future. Revan's Revenge, as our new mod with less of the groundwork done compared to the other two, will be getting a significant amount of the focus in this cycle, and the first release, covering the Mandalorian Wars through KOTOR 2, will include the basic setup and rosters for the Sith, Republic, and Mandalorian playable factions. The biggest focus across all of the mods for this release, though, is the Galactic level, specifically the maps and everything that comes with that. Every single Galactic map in Thrawn's Revenge is being rebuilt from the ground up, except for maybe some of the from the ground up layouts themselves, along with all of the progressive maps in Fall of the Republic, and of course every map in Revan's Revenge since none of them existed yet. There are a few historical maps in Fall of the Republic which are more recent, so those won't be changing quite as much. The way we handle planet coding has allowed us to build up a huge library of planets and a pretty in-depth internal map with period-by-period breakdowns of planet ownership, meaning we have a pretty solid and wide basis to improve some of our planet selections in maps where we just didn't have as many options available before. This is especially true in Fall of the Republic's progressive maps. In Thrawn's Revenge, factions being added tended to mean their territory was just patched on top of older map layouts, so we're overdue for a fresh rebuild from first principles to ensure map flow and balance is where we want it to be. One major change here is that we're now able to make it so progressive maps with configurable era starts can have different planets based on which area you choose. So if you start in 12 ABY, we don't have to make the New Republic necessarily control 90% of the planets on the map. Instead, we're able to tailor which planets we have to the factions actually present there. While not every faction is in and ready, we are basing the map design on the final list of playable factions that we intend to have. So while you won't necessarily have fully fleshed out Hutts and Siruvi yet, you will start to see some more bare-bones versions of these factions be present on the map and fleshed out more as we go through the next few cycles. Maps have traditionally been split into full galactic progressive maps, historical maps focused on a specific war or conflict, and Infinity's maps based on a specific game mode or idea, like the single planet start maps or the former Empires at War map in Thrawn's Revenge. In Point 3, we're also including a fourth variety, regional progressive maps. These will largely be built on the same principles of the usual progressive maps, where era progression and era selection are both available, but they'll only focus on specific areas of the galaxy, allowing us to use some of the planets which will usually fall by the wayside in the larger maps, or shine some light on some factions which may not get the most attention in other situations. This also means certain historical scenarios get more naturally covered by default in these maps, leaving us more room to focus on actual historical maps more directly. For example, in Thrawn's Revenge, 2 of the scenarios that have been most heavily requested are a map focusing on the Rebellion or New Republic's early moves against the warlords in the south, including Eriadu, as well as a map focusing on the post-Zinj campaigns. These are things which could have been standalone historic maps, but will fit really well within what we'd like to do for regional progressive maps, giving us a lot more options. There'd also be things like the Unknown Regions getting their own standalone map for this. The hope for this release is to get at least one regional progressive map done for each mod. On the faction side, with 3 new factions to still flesh out in Revan's Revenge, including at least some basic government mechanics for them, we will not be introducing any new playable factions in Thrawn's Revenge or Fall of the Republic just yet. Though, as I mentioned, many of the future playable factions, like the Hutts, will be getting their initial setup started in this release. We'll have a separate video going over the factional changes coming in Thrawn's Revenge, but there are a few higher level goals with the existing factions that I'll quickly sum up here. First, the New Republic will have its roster progression and research sorted out and updated along with a few new options. The Imperial factions just received most of the attention in the last update, and we're glad Legitimacy seems to have been very well received, so there will be a bit more cleanup and fleshing out of Legitimacy there, including some endgame goals for it, which we'll go over in its own update. Related to that, the Empire itself's leader progression will be getting some significant updates. The Hapens will get their government mechanics fleshed out a bit more as well, with their existing houses, including a couple new units for both space and ground, while making some adjustments to existing content based on feedback we've received so far, and particularly working to expand their currently very limited fighter selection. A big area of focus for this release, especially as we put more of a spotlight on the Unknown Regions more generally, will be the Empire of the Hand. They had the core part of their space roster redone a couple releases ago, but there are still a few space units to finish in that tied to their smaller member groups, which will also be fleshed out into further government mechanics. Beyond that, we're also beginning the long-awaited and long-needed overhaul of their ground roster, which will be entirely redesigned. In Fall of the Republic, there will continue to be the expansion and fleshing out of existing elements, including expanding the Republic command staff, with new systems for choosing Jedi and clone heroes. Tactical maps will continue to see improvement over the 0.3 release as we introduce a few extra ones and continue our process of going through to overhaul or improve existing ones as needed. This can be as broad as redoing the entire playable area, or as minor as removing props that obstruct vision or changing lighting setups because they're either too dark or too bright. In space, map changes will largely focus on the visual elements for 0.3, like working to start some skybox updates, more planet model and texture improvements as well as variety, lighting improvements, and so on. Significant systemic overhauls to map layouts and how maps work will probably come in a later release. On ground, one element which we will be significantly focusing on are the indigenous units or militia, which we'll be redoing with some elements tying things into the Galactic map more. There will also be additional work on new story missions. This will include trying to fix up certain existing ones like the Katana mission, but there will also be entire storylines added to certain Galactic conquests, like the Hunt for Malevolence Galactic conquest in Fall of the Republic. The 0.3 release will also see the return of our long-awaited survival mode, which has taken a few releases off and has been rebuilt by Kiwi. There's a few other game modes we've been playing around with which we'll hopefully be able to show off this cycle as well, though survival is the only one we can be reasonably certain we'll have in 0.3. Beyond all of that, we will of course continue to work on bug fixes and polish. So that is basically the overview of the major areas we're going to be focusing on the 0.3 cycle. Obviously this list isn't exhaustive, but hopefully you have a reasonable idea of what to expect. Each of these things will be shown off more and explained in more depth on their own throughout the next couple months, so if you want to follow the updates as they happen or see them in action, make sure to subscribe here or to join our Discord server linked in the description. Alright, that was the first of our 4 preview videos. That's the longest one, so it's all downhill from here. But that's generally what we're working on in the 0.3 series of releases. It's not exhaustive. There's a bunch of other stuff coming that didn't really fit in that video, or which we'll be showing off separately as we go. But yeah, so at the end there, we covered a bit of the story mission stuff that Joel especially has been working on since he joined. I don't know if anyone in the dev server wants to rename themselves because it's showing our names there. But yeah,
I mean, I would, but I can't.
you can't rename yourself?
Nope.
Enough
Oh,
information.
I'll do that for you.
Uh,
Did I just like not trust the young apprentices to spell or something? I don't know.
Something probably
Guess
happened.
not.
Yeah, so that is something you can expect to start seeing in more of the historical maps, especially that the clip there was from the Hunt for Malevolence, which is getting a ton of new story stuff. There's a few other missions being worked on as well. Some of it's going to be worked into the main Galactic Conquest, but the work on the Galactic Conquest level really is the big thing for point 3. So a lot of new maps, a lot of redone maps. Shut up, Trebek. And yeah, that's going to include a lot of faction stuff. So you saw some of the first Hutt stuff there. Sky has been basically doing 3 per day of the Hutt roster for a couple days. So there's a few more to show off as far as that goes. Maybe I should play the mission intros that you just uploaded as well now. That might be a good time for this.
One of the videos is essentially what you just showed. The other two are the new ones.
Okay, which one is the one I just showed then?
Adregado and Rush.
Okay, so I'll put the other one on. So I'm gonna have to mute these, which means we can talk over them. Just because there is movie music used in the game when they play. So imagine what you're seeing, but with sound as well. Because I've had about 200 videos blocked and claimed in the last day, and I want to avoid that for a couple weeks at least until I can get those ones under control. So the point 2 release cycle of Empire War
It'd be really great, Joel, if you could talk to the viewers about how you have done a lot of this work, because obviously it's been a long process.
Yeah. The worst part here is, or the fun part rather, how the intro crawl is set up is so horrible. It's essentially a model just flying by, and you can't move the camera angle. You have to wait until this entire thing is done. It's so annoying.
Welcome to EAW modding.
Yeah.
Okay.
There might be other ways we can redo it ourselves, but I don't know that there'd be anything that's as flexible as this is. Like for the Galactic level stuff, we might be able to just render out a text crawl we do ourselves as a video.
Would be worth it.
Because that'd be really easy to do. It's just a moving text plane and a star background.
The main gimmick of this mission is that as the CIS, you have to bring the bulwarks away from Ferrest, and the more ships break through the blockade, the more you have later on the Galactic level. So you are kind of forced to play rather well in this one, although it's not too hard because it's still an opening mission.
So how are you doing these flyby shots?
I take a map and just place markers all over the place. Like at the end, I have a few 50 or 60 markers, just so the camera moves from introcam 1 to introcam 2, and it's a bit tedious, but the actual comment to have them camera comments are way worse because you have to guess the actual X, Y, and Z coordinates if you don't use actual markers. I don't know why Petroglyph did it this way, but oh my god.
Well, now we have the Lua commands that can actually get specific coordinates. Before you couldn't even do that. That was a dream in the eyes of baby modders everywhere.
You're showing a black screen now.
Yeah, I know. I have to load the other
Ori
one.
is a professional.
Clearly.
You do realize that in most streams like this, there's the on-air people and the production people that are separate jobs.
Yes.
Alright, so we got
which
one more
one's
here.
this?
Yeah, this time
Sounds like
The
you need a
Repub-
Corey or Charlie.
the Republic starts 2 years earlier, technically. It's like a flashback opening mission where you have to conquer the orbit of Farost, because I wanted to add something to make the missions a bit more distinctive. And we have so little information about the actual Forest campaign besides a few sourcebook mentions, so I just had to make a bit up.
Well, I think
It's-
that's really good. I think what you've done is very sensible,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's good to have flashbacks. Flashbacks, like that's not something that you see very often in RTS story campaigns.
What about Galactic Battlegrounds, Bob? It's here. We need
What
to
I'm
remind you.
hoping for in Obi-Wan is a flashback scene where it uses the Clone Wars animation style rather than live action. So if we can replicate that in some way, that'd be cool. But are there any particular missions or story things that you have that you're most interested in trying to do? You won't be held to anything. So again, for everyone, a lot of this is going to be us talking a bit speculatively. So feel free to.
I started this entire project because I wanted to make a base game style campaign for the New Republic, so I'm most interested in doing New Republic missions, but it's fun to do them for everyone. Like I mentioned a few days ago, to do something for Greater Maldrude where they have to conquer Kashyyyk to gain Grand Admiral Sin to join them. And this is like something, it makes the game more fun because you don't have to actually kill Sin's forces. He joins you mid-battle and he's your reward.
Yeah, that
So-
certainly makes a lot more story sense.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like Endor or Bakura are something I really want to do. And I want to, at the Shadowhand campaign GC, I think having the opening battle be a ground mission where you have to fight against Imperial forces next to a crashed ISD would be way more fitting. And that's also something I worked a bit on over the last year. So
I like the extra shipyards. I think that's yeah. So I'm really looking forward to try a lot of these out because I haven't actually got around to that yet.
I see that space arc.
Yeah, so there will be a lot of those like real story missions, and then in the future, something else that we want to work a bit more on are more of the random missions, kind of like what Fall of the Republic has now, but some with a tactical element. That whole system is going to be recoded for this release and also applied to Revan's Revenge and Thrawn's Revenge. Because the way they're done in Fall of the Republic is pretty hacky. It was kind of done at an early point in the Galactic framework, so there's a lot that Pox did since then that I could plug into a lot more cleanly. Because right now it's a very messy feature. So good work so far, Joel. And we'll have. I want to do a whole dedicated thing just to look at that kind of stuff because there is a lot there. I was even thinking about like opening it up the game and going through all this stuff for Hunt for Malevolence right now, but we'll probably save that all for its own showcase later on.
the actual space stuff, galactic stuff, would be fun to look into at some point. Because now the Malevolence retreats a lot and it's a real cat and mouse experience. And Rhino did an awesome interior Malevolence map. I have to point that out because it's really cool.
Yeah, no, I played a little bit of it and it's fun and a little bit annoying at the same time to try and hunt Grievous down. But it's great when you actually do because then you get transitioned into the Malevolence and yeah.
It
It's really
forced me
fun.
to take some pretty satisfying fights when I was testing it too. So
Yeah, I think there are 3 or 4 places where we're
Yeah.
actually going to be doing interior maps for certain ships, uh, for stuff that's planned in the next release. So that's going to be fun to set up all the props for. For one of them, actually, Bob made a bunch of props earlier on that I think are what's also being used for the Malevolence interior one.
Yeah.
That's-
Generic New Republic stuff should be fairly easy. Tantive 4 and Mon Cal cruisers are pretty similar in terms of interiors. So
Yep, and we have lots of examples from squadrons as well, which I think will come in handy.
And Lego Star Wars.
Of course,
Oh,
the most
yes.
important.
Well, we'll talk about our Lego Star Wars mod later on. That'll be right at the end.
Is that after the fast food one?
I will. That's done. That's the next video
Before-
announcement is actually just the release video for Attack of the Food.
And
Oh.
then Ray of Hope.
There's too many mods to really get into. It's just mods all the way down. But we have a lot of the ground map previews showing in the background right now, rotating through. There is one thing in particular that Keelhaul wanted to talk about with that. So I'll load up one of the specific images for that, Keelhaul, if you want to start off.
Yeah, the third image is probably the best one to start with. Then just play them in order. I don't know. So last year I showed off Citadel Station, but then we canceled Citadel Station because it doesn't really make sense to fight in the space station for Telos when you only do that in KOTOR 2, and even in KOTOR 2 you fight on the ground. So what's the point? But I ended up using it for the new map for Slumpics 5, and so yay, space map. I said I was going to make it, and I am technically.
The one with
Still making
the
it.
Duros and Celestian, is that the one you want me to open, or?
It's the space ones. I mean, and then the other thing, which is I wasn't really eager to show off my work in progress maps because none of them are very done. But the other thing that I did get done is, so in the base game you can have like certain things like tauntauns, and there's a Slumpics 5, and Banthas walking around the background. I figured out how to apply that to civilians, rancors, and other things. And using what I think was originally a glitch, I managed to make it so that they will walk around without actually being in the same playable space as the playable map area. So effectively, you have like a little zoo in each map where civilians, rancors, and other things are walking around. At some point, there will be mouse droids, and I want to get those Mustafar lava droids flying around as well. So it'll be like little friends everywhere for you to see.
critters.
let's get gonk droids. Gonk droids are the most important thing.
Of course, I should point out that these take a while to actually insert into maps, so they will be slow coming. But this is Ord Benir's map, so that's an example of one that has some friends.
These will be
Uh,
very, very useful for missions as well.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like like when you're attacking the inside of like a larger ship, it only makes sense that you have mouse droids running around.
Yeah, so I should clarify, since people asking in the chat a little bit, these are separate. The kind of new part there is that they are separate from the regular playable area. So it's not that you're going to be like driving through a crowded civilian side. We're actually trying to not have the player massacre a bunch of civilians, because most of what that leads to is annoying edgelord Discord role playing that we have no interest in and ban people for. But yeah.
Yeah. So you can go to the next images, but basically these are just examples of like out of bounds areas that are like still visible. Not these, but
Do we want to segue into how we're considering reworking militia forces?
I don't know if we should really
Me-
talk too much about that right now, because
We haven't
it's
even
figured
figured
it
it
still
out.
really decided ourselves.
yeah,
have we?
that's
Yeah.
even more whip than a lot of what we'd be talking about. But
Yeah,
we
like,
are
we haven't even figured out how to figure it out.
Yeah, we are changing a lot of that. So the way that the indigenous forces work on maps, that is going to be very different. It'll tie into a few other mechanics. But yeah, we're not quite where we're ready to announce too much with that yet. There will be more civilian types as well. We'll hopefully be able to get to some
Militia types, Corey. Don't encourage that.
militia. Alien types is what I meant in that instance. But I guess that's a good point to show this. So Sky has also been working on a lot of infantry modeling in the last little while. And there's a ton of them here.
And they all look good.
Yeah. So infantry is always the hardest and most annoying thing to do. So Sky put together like a ton of them very quickly while learning how to do it. So there's some Revan's Revenge stuff you'll see here, some later era stuff. This is what Ram Coda was one of the earliest ones from that I've been using in the latest Fall of the Republic preview. So we have early and late days of RAM. So you've seen the early days RAM in game. You haven't seen the later days RAM, which is I guess one of the first Imperial Reign specific bits of content we've shown. So yeah, there's Mr. TR/IR Ram Coda. This is not an announcement that Ram Coda is going to be in TR. Unfortunately, he is kind of busy, but who knows? So there's more of it there, and yeah, so we have a few other species types that we're going to be adding into that with both the planetary forces and even things like the New Republic military. We want to swap in different types of heads. That's something that other mods have already done in different ways. So a bit more variety in the more coalition forces of the New Republic. Ithorians, Klatooinians. There's technically Klatooinians in the base game, but we have a better model from Inertial now. Inertial also did the Ithorian model as part of trying to make all the characters from the initial Edge of Despair campaign, which was a tabletop campaign we were doing a couple years ago. So I've been trying to model some more alien infantry heads. I did a few for the Jedi Masters a few years ago, and we are going to be getting more Jedi types as well, more Jedi major heroes, because one of the things that's also happening with the Republic that I kind of alluded to in the initial video is they will be getting a command staff mechanic like they have for their admirals for clone commanders, clone commandos, Jedi, and I think there's the ground hero one in game now as well.
It slipped in one for Republic Army officers, yeah.
A lot of heroes.
Yes, it is FOTR. There is no shortage of hero options.
Yes. So the command staff stuff is probably one of the government mechanics that'll be most widespread among the different mods. There's usually at least one, maybe two factions per mod that it'd probably benefit from, but
yeah, we were considering some systems for CIS as well, but we'll have to see how that goes.
So do you want to go into any more on how some of that works, Jorrit, since that's kind of your area of expertise?
Sure. Yeah. So the big thing that was preventing this before was just fitting everything onto the build bar, because it's super full even with just the two. So what we came up with is a little button you can have that disables. You can pick between the different systems, so there's only one showing at a time. Yeah, and then once you have that, and then do a little bit of rearranging and whatnot, you can fit all kinds of stuff in, and now we can just start slipping in all kinds of fun clone commandos and whatnot that we've been hoping to do eventually, or Credo wants to make some cool commanders. So
there is also a way people can potentially get more clone commandos in game that I won't mention to anyone, but it does involve how people interact with the mod. So if I'm any more specific than that, then it's going to be way too easy. But I said no to some stuff, which I don't often do. But if people,
it was a weird line to double down on.
Look, no one gives a shit about Commer.
I know.
That. Not
Wait, how's
the other
that
thing.
poll going? Because you did a poll, right, Jordan?
Yes. It's kind of weirdly confused, actually.
This is
Okay,
not.
The
there's
obvious
a
choice
clear
is
there's a
obvious.
clear two choices from it though, to be fair.
There's a clear one choice. The second choice is less clear.
When people are voting for multiple, though, so the way you did this poll was having people vote once for their first choice, once for the second choice. But would it have made more sense to just do vote for your top two in the one?
Maybe.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. It wasn't a very well run poll. We can all agree on this.
This electoral system is a sham. I am trying to download another image that I just remembered you posted in the tester chat, because I think that shows off the way the command staff on the government page looks right now. So right now, this refers to it as a Jedi Council. That'll probably not be the case, though it does have a nice insult to Anakin in there, which he's been through enough and he gets kind of violent, so I don't know if we want to really be too hard on him. Go turn that on. So this is what it looks like right now on the Republic government page. So you get to pick your admirals, you get to pick your Jedi, you get to pick your clone officers, your clone commandos, and your army
Sector
officers.
Army Commanders is still there, but it doesn't fit on the screen because there's too much stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's above, I think.
Yeah, you can just scroll above and it's there.
So one thing that I haven't actually brought up internally yet with a lot of this is that we will probably end up having some cap eventually on the number of choices you get throughout a campaign. Otherwise, the Republic will just always have heroes. So that is a limitation that may or may not get implemented in some form, but is probably one that it is sensible for us to start considering depending on how many options we end up having.
It'd be nice. I'd like to keep that off for the AI because I kind of find it really entertaining to actually have a constant source of stuff to fight. But
that'd probably also depend on difficulty, because that is the kind of thing we can scale pretty easily.
Yeah.
Okay, there are more map pictures being posted, which I will try to download. And I guess while I do that, we will go to an animation that Porto did before we go into our first little reel of models to show off. So I mentioned in the first video that we have a bunch of new content for some of the factions that are going to be coming up in the future. So we don't have any factions that are going to become playable in the next version of Thrawn's Revenge or Fall of the Republic, because we're already working on 3 new factions for Revan's Revenge. But we are going to be doing a lot of the initial units for all of them, for all of the upcoming factions in TR and FOTR, because we do want to get the maps to a place where we don't have to redo them every time. So this will be, I guess, the first look at a good chunk of units for one of them.
Make sure
Yeah, I know. It's gonna be too late.
Well, it's 3 seconds. I don't think they'll pick it up.
Hopefully not. But
should I talk about the animation?
Sure.
So I had a choice of a couple different animations to do for the stream, and I chose it played through again. So I decided to do this animation, and I put it to the Who from their Fallen Order appearance. And, sucks that copyright be copyright. And I wanted to show off Sky's new Hutt ships in a cool way. So that's the big boys right there. There's also several other animations that I'm working on, but they weren't ready for this stream. So
well, I will put all the unit rotations on loop now. There are some that were in the first video, some that were in that animation preview there. And technically the Richter should be in this as well, but I don't think there was a
Well,
Yeah, the
standalone turnaround.
rest thing.
not even a Hutt ship per
No.
se. It was
Yeah,
just-
yeah. Okay.
So this looks like a Lancer. It's not a Lancer. There's a good reason for this, though. Nolan, I don't know if Sky is if her mic's on, so
I mean, Jord is equally as valid. It's a thing, but there's basically a duplicated Lancer stat block for a new Burkian frigate in the source book. So some of the Lancer depictions that are not necessarily specific very much lean into the art style, and since it is a subsidiary, this is totally a legally distinct Lancer made by a branch of the company for obvious marketing purposes.
So that is one of the ships that'll probably be turning up on starting forces in the redone maps, because I think that's one of the earliest ones.
Yeah,
Whereas
and the Cossack, but
yeah, because a lot of the rest of these are from the re-emergent Hutt Empire, which will be part of the Hutt's government mechanics. They won't necessarily be in the non-playable Hutt forms, but like one of the things with the Hutts is that whenever people ask about the Hutts, they usually just assume it's going to be like a collection of Clone Wars units that are thrown together as some sort of just random collection of pirate faction thing. And there will be some mercenary elements, some older ships for the Hutts, like a specific refit of a overhyped movie unit. But
which, to be fair, we need not use beyond starting forces anyways.
But as you can see here, the Hutts have a lot of established designs, a lot of classes that we can use their very clear art style to make new designs for. Sky did a great job on these so far, setting up the material standards and the model standards for the faction. So yeah, there will be probably, like, we don't necessarily plan out the factions to go in a particular order anymore, but the Chiss and the Hutts are very likely to be the next ones to come. So, for all of you, is there any faction that you are particularly looking forward to? You in here with me, and chat. You know what? You can have opinions too.
Hudson, yeah, Hutts and Dinos both seem like they can be pretty fun to set up.
The top.
Only in TR.
I'm interested in the Hutts when they get here.
Speaking of
Very
dinos. So this is from last year.
true.
You've all seen this before, but since the Sea Rook weren't actually included in the release, we had to, like, I think it's like 2 releases in a row. We've put in the Sea Ruvi, and then like right before release, we put them back in a branch and re-enabled them first thing after the release. But here's Inertial's fantastic Sea Ruvi, and we'll go back to that.
The
Business
business
dino.
dino.
Yeah, the business dino meme was right after that came from the stream last year, right? The anniversary stream.
I believe so.
So
Yes, I think that was definitely my fault.
So
You
16th
deliberately
anniversary of
did it.
TR. Really, this is in celebration of the first anniversary of Business Dino.
I mean, yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to Siruvi because of Business Dino, but also because they're kind of wacky and we don't have it in probably the Hutts as well. They're both pretty wacky, non-humanoid races. So I think it's interesting to get more of that kind of alien in as major players in the mods.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Oz couldn't be here, but he wanted me to tell everyone that he's really looking forward to doing Siruvi models as well. He talks about how much he loves it all the time. So
Surprised he didn't drop 30 models right before the stream started.
that's charts now. He did drop several models for Bothan stuff, which I don't think we're going to show. I don't know if he wants to show off the one he finished today, but there are a few
Well,
other models he's
A
finished
couple
recently.
renders of one ship.
Well, he did
Yeah,
I
the
think 2 other
thing.
Bothan ones in the past. Like there's a Bothan destroyer, which I don't think we've shown yet, that I'm really excited to get in because it looks really cool. But
And then there's, well, the frigate's an existing ship, and
Yeah.
that's like actually has source book stats, so it's not exactly too surprising of a thing.
there's also some other minor faction stuff in this that we'll go through now. So this that you're going to start seeing loop here is a bunch of models from Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic and Imperial Reign, actually, that didn't necessarily fit any specific classification for the other stuff that I put together. I probably could have put the other minor faction in with the Hutts, but this has a ton of stuff by Sky and Philoraptor in particular, but also some of Oz's more recent work. So, because it's mostly the textured stuff we've gone through, and there are a few untextured models in here as well, which we'll see some of Oz, and I think T-78 Corellian stuff here. I couldn't get the Surfake in, which is a Vagari ship, but I have a separate render of that I'll play after this as well.
Surfic will probably be more interesting when all of them are done too, because there's a lot of variants for that.
So yeah, there's a lot of shit hidden in here that people have been asking for a while. Oh god, that was I just got the effect. You know the thing with like the
Including me.
rotating mask, where like it inverts, the face inverts.
Yes.
I just had that with the Class C, and it really messed me up.
Finally, a ship I want
Yeah.
is in.
I will point out that nothing in here need not show up for a while.
Yeah.
So
Some of this will be first showing up in either submods or Imperial Reign. Some of it will be in the next releases. Some of it may end up having to sit out a little bit longer. But like the Assault Frigate and a good chunk of the New Republic stuff has actually been done for a while. Like before 0.1's release, I think. It's just there wasn't anywhere to specifically use it yet. Like I mentioned in the first video that the New Republic is going to be getting some more focus with how its roster works and is built. Because the New Republic and Empire have a ton of options, both already in and going forward. And we want to cover as much as we can, but we don't want to have a bunch of redundant units all available at the same time. So there'll be a bit more with how you choose to progress with them, especially going into the Galactic Line stuff. There's a bunch that comes in then. So
You just sneak another Hapen ship in here.
there were two that I think both were in the other video though.
Yeah.
So there are a ton of Hapen fighters and bombers and stuff that are modeled that there are a lot of Oz's models especially that are ready. I just didn't have a chance to render out all of them, especially because my turntable renders were much worse than Philo and Sky's. But so this is one of the Corellian units, the Proficient. And there's one other Corellian unit that may have made it into this version of the video, or I might have to play it separately. Okay, it cut off the Rick Houston a little bit. But yeah, this is the Strident.
this is the Proficient, I think.
No, what's playing right now. is the
Sorry,
Strident.
I'm seeing the delayed thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the
Yeah.
way, your camera's broken on
Yeah,
here.
it's off for us.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, the dev
It's been
our
off for like the last
up-to-date thing is just
15
there you
there we go.
Okay.
That's why
And
we were
no one
behind.
said anything.
Yeah, you're all
I
really
was wondering
helping.
if it was
Thanks.
just like me, and I was like, I don't want to embarrass myself by speaking up for this.
We
Wow.
mentioned it in the chat, but it's like hidden away now that they have it like in a
Nobody
pocket
reads
corner.
This is the chunky wreck.
And yeah,
That's the
Rick
Rick
Houston
Destroyer, so that's the bigger one. It gets unique
Dreadnought.
model now. Or yeah.
Hence the hangar, and then the bridge is like the Munificent style bridge in non-cartoon style.
And these are the escape pods used in some of the missions. Though there's in Ascendancy, there is a mechanic for the New Republic that uses escape pods that I've always kind of wanted to try to transition to TR, but I don't know if it'll work super well.
Is that the robot from the Han Solo Adventures?
These
No,
are the
it's-
SDs.
It's Dark
Yeah.
Empire.
Okay.
the Dark Empire ones.
Right,
Dark
right.
Empire SD series.
So
Yeah,
Philo,
excellent
those
put
were
together.
a lot of those Dark Empire and Balmora stuff. Whereas so you want to talk a bit about any of those?
Yeah, I planned them for a while, I think. Wanted to do them. And yeah, was quite happy that we actually decided to introduce them in this next version.
But good. I have
So-
to develop some stat stuff for them still, especially for weapon types, but they should be fun.
And Balmora will show up on a lot of maps because it gets the benefit of having a lot of influence stuff now, and a lot of story relevant stuff now. So I don't think it was really on any progressives anymore. It might be on the large one. It's just been so long since I've played that.
It's not, to recollection, it's pretty much just in historicals.
Yeah, it almost didn't make the cut, but then Philo reminded me that there's so
Not-
much coming for
no.
it, and then it got added.
Yeah. And yeah, the transports now are just like super transports. So
Yep.
mission stuff or converted for bulk cruisers for independent forces, things like that.
I'm
And it's up
actually
Terraform.
I'm actually working on a new Balmora map using the base game editor so it could be free released, but there wasn't really anything I could show without it looking really janky because of how I was doing it, because there was a lot of empty spaces. Yeah.
Oh, hey,
so
it's the turbo blimp.
the best.
Yes, the thing that we need
Warship
mission
blimp.
rewards to exist for.
Yep. Blimp.
All right, so that's going to loop through at least one more time. If you guys want to talk a bit about your favorite units coming up or anything you're particularly looking forward to get done, I will be back in about 65 seconds.
Did I plug?
Wait, Corey's left us in.
Man, he must
in
really
charge.
trust us.
Yeah.
Time to
By the way,
violate that
so
trust.
tracked rocket thingy. That's the A5RX Juggernaut. That's an alternate Juggernaut type.
I like it.
Assault Frigate
That's
2,
one I really love,
which everyone should recognize.
If you don't, go back and play base game, and then remember why you play mods.
I love that sense
Oh.
of passion.
I mean, it's beautiful.
I'd make an Armada joke, but then Proto would try to kill me. So
The Dornian gunship by Sky, I think this was.
yeah,
Reminds me
that's
of a
one
police
we need
light
to figure
bar
out
on the
handling
back
for.
Just two
If
ships for
there's-
the Sky campaign.
Admittedly, if there is something we haven't really had a precedent for, it's things that are in kind of that 75 to 90 meter range.
And the
The
Class
Lost
C
Rock
pointy box.
Yeah.
What are we doing
Nebula
with this
B.
again?
I think
Nebulon
it's
B predecessor
oh.
for it'd basically
Okay.
be an Era 1 unit for FOTR.
Okay. By the way,
I
this
think-
isn't just your average probe droid. That is the Hunter Killer probe droid, which is like
Well,
100 meters tall or something.
No, that was
Not-
the combat probot for Corellia.
Oh, that is a
Actually.
ground. That is a ground combat probe droid. I see.
Yeah.
And then that was finally the Corporate Alliance artillery, I think.
Galactic
Thing
Battle
that's been,
Ground.
yeah, the
Yep.
thing that's been slated for CSA since we made the faction list and never bothered to get done.
Yep. And now they have artillery eventually. A very excited Mandalorian fighter, a different kind of escape pod, which will actually also probably be useful as a prop on ground, I think.
Yeah.
It's already a prop.
It's already been
Both
coded.
of them are already
Perfect.
props
Perfect.
directly.
There's also a banged up version of it too.
So when are we doing the Hunt the Droids, a New Hope mission?
Oh no.
Imperial Reign.
Nothing's more fun than an empty desert with 2 droids running around in it.
Well, the joke I'd make there is when you just make Mos Eisley City just completely filled with NPC entities, and then you need to run your stormtroopers up to what happened to be R2 and 3PO.
The real
So that it can go
mission
well.
is like we want people to be able to change the story however they want, right? So the real mission is doing the Luke goes to Tashi station for the power converters.
Manager.
Yes. And
This is
then the
veering-
rest of the trilogy just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
This is
You
veering
hope them-
very close into the Rexar campaign of Warcraft 3. At this point, we might as well just make an MMO.
Yeah, Onager, another Imperial Reign unit.
Galaxies 2.
Some Imperial Reign units will be in a compiled new canon submod that the MC75 submod is going to be converted into. But we don't want to put everything in there. Like we do want the mod to have some unique stuff. So we haven't decided exactly what that's going to look like.
Ah, yes, Corellian.
Oh, yeah, and there's the Strident.
That is the Strident.
Beautiful.
After the
Right.
earlier
Battleship.
proficient for the Corellians. So
A very big Strident size.
I'm gonna.
Hers is 2150 meters to recollection for the Strident.
So next up, I will open the Surfake, which is one of the Vigari units. So this is a design that T78 did, with I think some input from Oz as well. But these are
Approvals.
Yeah, to recollection, I think this is like the fleet tendery
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
so
yeah,
T78. Do you
there's
want to
like-
talk a bit about this?
Well, it basically came down to the fact that the only Vigari description we have is the Pascler. It's a sphere. And in the interests of sort of readability and consistent design, The next one had to be kind of bulbous. So the Surfake is part cruiser, part freighter, part carrier, so lots of internal space. So cylinder. And I made a bit of a downward fin underneath it, kind of like going for a sort of relative primitive technology for Galactic Civil War era. So KOTOR sort of level of technology, maybe. And that's just about it, really. Put us some fuel tanks and some solder arms on the side, and you're done.
And so for those who are unfamiliar, the Vigari are one of the unknown region nomadic species that Thrawn and the Chiss fight a bunch of times. So good job bringing them to actual visual representation.
Yep. It actually kind of ends up looking a bit like the Vigari's face. So for the one bit of Vigari art we have.
And anyone who says Divinity Ascension gets banned.
Okay, I'm not going to finish that sentence.
Right, then we have this one, which I think Sky finished like today.
Yes,
Yep.
this was
Yeah,
posted
like-
like 2 hours ago.
Yeah, it was like an hour or two ago.
Which
Nova Courier from Star Wars Galaxies, I believe.
which
I
makes
guess
it
we're
actually
using it as an infantry lender, or I don't actually know.
I'm not sure if this is actually the most recent finished thing in the in the stream, because there's one more coming after this that I can't remember whether Philo posted it before or after Sky posted this.
4, I think.
I'm still using this opportunity to download more stuff from the chat. Right, so go from this to this. A new Republic unit. Not a new Republic unit, but a new Republic unit. That'll probably also be in the vein of mission rewards or some other roster swap.
I was just going to say mission rewards seem the most sensible thing.
I think it's already in, and it already is a hero.
Yes, there is a hero that had. I think Nemesis did this like the second you uploaded it.
Yes. We're
And
still going to. We're still
Yeah.
balancing the weaponry is still on to do
Yeah.
list, but it's
Figuring
it's a
out how
great
we want to
model.
handle the beam. Anything with stun is inherently going to be kind of finicky to bicker about.
But it looks great, and it's going to let you all play out your TCW army ideas
So
with this
when
as a potential centerpiece.
Lego Star Wars 3 version 1.
Were you going to say something there, Philo?
I didn't quite get what you said.
It just sounded like I thought you were about to say something. No.
No. All right.
Okay. Then what else did we have in this? So Arios has been learning some texturing, and there are a couple things that we're going to be showing off from them as well. But we got some Mon Calamari stuff here.
One of the MC80 designs, this one being the Western Game side profile one, which is also used for some of the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games, coincidentally. Which Oz and I kind of had a little epiphany when we realized that, wait, hold up, this is the same silhouette used in both. It was a really odd moment.
Yeah,
Not sure how we will
we-
actually use this.
But we continue to reach the capability of making an entire Mon Calamari faction, apparently.
That's Oz's long-term goal, which is really useful when we get to the Stellaris mod. But
clearly,
I mean, I know we're not doing the revolt factions anymore, but the Mon Calamari were always the
poster child.
The most viable of those, and who knows? Maybe that'll still be a thing.
Yeah, the mod 60th anniversary edition.
I mean, we're a quarter of the way there. Or at least I am. Who's been on the longest that's in the call right now other than me? Let's see.
Bob and I, maybe?
Mord, we have a very definitive answer for what is an MC80A for EaWX at least. Which is this design, Neratus's design, and then the mini Home 1 style from X-Wing Alliance. Not the wingless, Fun fact, Wikipedia tends to merge those. The source literally says it's not an ADA. Don't know why they call it an ADA in Wook. Yeah.
They were too busy focusing on whether they should keep the breast article for that.
Why you gotta bring that up?
Because it was
Brain
a very
hurts.
big deal for them. It's hilarious.
The only time they'll ever see one.
I think Ack almost got banned by the Wikipedia Discord for basically calling them a bunch of insults for being so angry about it being removed. They really don't like it.
What a fucking.
But speaking of Arios and Rhino have continued to do the death clone updates and new death clones, so I don't have these preloaded, so it might be a little bit jankier, but I guess the preloaded stuff didn't all load properly anyway, so I think I'll just swap out the videos for this. There we go. So
Okay,
this is the
jankiness is part of the charm.
130.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there are a few videos that Rhino uploaded of some of these.
Yeah.
Oh, and I will download that from Farshot as well. So after we do these death clone videos, do we go to the Revan's Revenge preview video, or do we go to the Era update thing? It can work
Yeah.
either
Put a
way.
poll. You could put a poll in chat while we go
Yeah.
through
I'm
death
typing.
clones.
Man, you should be Corey's producer, Bob. A poll would be good.
Can
Yeah,
moderators create one?
Only on Twitch. YouTube is behind the times on that one.
Never mind.
Fortunate.
Let's see. Era update. Era Revan. Era. Yeah.
I can load the separate video now. Look, I've been typing, loading videos, downloading, and trying to talk the whole time. It's been very, very multitasky.
Yeah. So this is actually where blast meshes come involved. It's on the Dominator and both the immobilizers in 0.2. But so the aggressor has the main guns. So when that hard point gets destroyed, a bit of the mesh gets destroyed as well. That's why it looks a bit weird in the death clones. But I've also done it for the Venators, engines, and the Peltist main gun as well.
It's definitely worthwhile for stuff like that.
Yeah, it just adds something a bit unique. So
I'm actually surprised the Era updates are winning that.
Wow.
they're a pain to do, but well worth it.
All looks very cool.
Corey, if I had to guess why, it's because people want to save Revan's Revenge for last.
Since when did the internet have restraint, though?
Never.
I think people just don't know what they are, so I'm more curious. Revan's Revenge, like, oh, it's Revan. He's shooting at spaceships.
Yep.
Revan is the most powerful space unit in Revan's Revenge. He's not in a ship. He just flies around in space with his lightsaber.
Like Leia in episode 8.
Yeah, but for longer and with a lightsaber. Will we see
so
Scarif and Rogue One characters all in the mods? Yes, in Imperial Reign. But
yeah, so this one's Arios's one. The previous two were mine. Arios has also done the Keldabe, Munificent, and some other ones, but I didn't have enough time to record them.
Death clones are always nice to have. YouTube's done a nice job.
I've been wanting for like a year and a half to go through and do like a compiled video of a bunch of them, and then just never end up being able to get around to it.
There's a lot now.
Yeah.
I can check.
You have to have it going to like do, and then explodes on the cannons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 97 from me has 10 at least tracked in the spreadsheet.
Oh my god.
I don't think that's including the hero Neils, so probably a bit more.
No. Yeah, but then you've got another, like 300 units to go. It's great.
Yeah, and then all the ones we redo.
Coming.
Yeah, and then the record didn't need to redo.
Was there wasn't an old Praetor one before Bob redid it, so that one doesn't. We always knew that was getting redone since you started doing the death clone, so I don't think that was in danger.
Yeah, no, the Praetor just goes poof.
Yeah, there are a few I've put off just because new models. But then Oz keeps redoing them again, so I have to put them off even longer.
And by the time you get to the end, you'll realize that you don't like your old ones anymore, and you have to redo them all.
I've already realized that. I don't like the stations, I don't like the victories or the Imperials, and yeah.
The Bakura that's right here, that's actually the first one that I actually did and finished properly.
All really adds to the effect. I still love the interior texture. So good job on that, Bob, but also great job on the animations, Arios and Rhino.
Oh, speaking of quality of life things, I think 99% of ships have the electric damage proxy, and any ship that has powered weapons has the little particle effect now, so...
Yeah, I will warn you of potential for abilities to change, but...
Yeah, I know.
It's not the worst thing to have, yeah.
Yeah, they won't get activated if the ability isn't there, so...
Yeah. It's, honestly, if we're actually being clean about it, not the worst thing to have shields and that set up on models in the first place, just even for, at worst, hero use.
Yep, so it's going to generally be a lot more readable when various units are using abilities now.
Stuff can be stunned and people can appreciate how powerful the stun is.
Yeah.
Which gets undervalued.
Because they don't know it's there.
Yeah.
The ion cannon is shit because it doesn't even destroy the units.
Only on Galactic.
Mm. That just means the pilots aren't paying attention, the captains, and they just drift into the planet. That's the way you can...
Yep, knocks them out of
headcanon
orbit.
that. I mean, it's technically a planetary defense network, so they're theoretically it's an abstraction of a bunch of hypervelocity guns and ion cannons and everything for everyone.
Yeah.
Yep.
LNR batteries, large capital scale turbo lasers, large single shot turbo lasers, like, yeah. There's no shortage of DTS guns in Star Wars.
If you really are wondering why an ion cannon can destroy a ship on the Galactic level, it's because a wizard did it.
Yeah, it's me, I'm the wizard.
I thought you were an EAW and some other game modder in a less evil form. What game was that? Where it's just...
Oh, it was Titanfall 2, I think, where there was a modder called Bob the Bob.
Yeah, apparently I get around. I didn't realize. Oh, I like this Tagco one with the extra chained explosions. Those always look nice.
I think Rhino finished that last night or this morning.
I finished that like 30 minutes ago.
Oh, there you go.
You know, I mean, we should have these anniversary streams more often than once a year. We get so much done.
Yeah.
We got to celebrate our 16 and 1/3 anniversary.
Please no.
Are we celebrating half birthdays? Like, we could do... I guess we can't really do the anniversary of mod announcements because that's just April Fool's Day and no one would take any of it seriously.
No, but see, that's the perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
this
feel
is
like
a good
you
one.
I feel like, Corey, you've made it so that everyone takes stuff very seriously on April Fool's Day.
No, but people who like follow the mod closely do, but it's the randos out in the world who would otherwise be asking a lot of strange questions who aren't aware of my general policy on April Fool's Day stuff.
What you mean Oz's takeover post last April Fool's wasn't real.
That's the only lie we've told. There was the Star Trek Armada post about the incursion one where all of our stuff would be going into STA3. So technically that wasn't our post though. So it doesn't count.
We can blame Connor in either case.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Are these the updated Venator death clones?
Yes.
Yeah, they are. So if you watch the video back, and you can see the engines explode, and then they turn into the blast mesh. So
I'll let it go through one more time.
Yeah.
Like part of the whole April Fool's announcement thing is that a lot of the mods do start off with me joking to the team that it's going to happen. And like, oh yeah, it's funny because we're not doing that. But then it just slowly acclimatizes them to the fact that we are in fact doing all the things I joke about, and that's why the Mass Effect mod will have its first assets shown today.
Oh no.
Unfortunately, damage thresholds don't apply to hard-pointed ships, so
That's fine. That's what the flames coming from the hard points are for.
I have a script that actually does that I've never updated
Oh.
for the framework. If we really wanted to use it for something, then we'd be able to. But
it works for the non-hard-pointed ships, so all the Hapens have it. So.
What we're talking about for reference to the stream is progressive damage particles showing up on ships as they take damage. Currently, they're all linked to hard points, but on ships without hard points, Rhino set it up so that it basically behaves like vehicles on land, where smoke and fire starts coming out as they take more damage.
I think theoretically you could do some stuff with alt meshes for that, but that probably wouldn't look good on ship levels.
Yeah, that'd get a little bit difficult to set up around
Yeah.
hard points as well.
Yeah. Well, the comment I was making that for was stuff that didn't really have any targetable ones, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll open some of the other renders before we move on to the next stuff. So let's open the AAC. Porto has been making a new AAC model. So here, oh god, it's see-through.
I cry.
It's here now.
Oh, I have an updated
Oh.
turntable. I just posted in
Oh.
the
For the
thread.
AAC?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll download that during one of the other videos. But
yeah,
we'll
where we no
go.
longer need to skew the stats weirdly because the other model is small and underarmed.
So here's something you'll see the rest of in a little bit, because Farshot is rendering the rest of it out. But here's a sneak preview of the back of something. What could it be? Who knows?
Dun, dun, dun.
But there's also, I guess, a series of... So Oz and Porto have been working on a few things that maybe, Porto, if you want to talk about some of it.
Oh shit! I'm eating something. Yeah,
Oh,
so
then...
we're doing submod stuff. So okay, I just swallowed it. So this is the MC85. I worked on it in secret. It's coming. Best Mon Cal ship I've ever made. Very nice detail by us, especially on the bottom. And there's also one other submod that we're doing. I don't know if you
I can go to that video now.
Yeah. So we really want to do at least like a sequel or canon submod. So the MC85 and T70 are the first bits of that. Then the next submod is something I've been wanting to get into the mod for 6 years, I think, and it's the impeller.
Is why you
So
got the submod.
I finally won. I have I've beaten the game of modding. I got down on one knee and asked Osritzel if he wanted to make an impeller, and he's like, "Yes, I've already made an impeller." So yeah, so I got that textured. And there's also the compeller, the legator, and the contender.
There's a few of the like mainline TR ships mixed in with these renders as well, so it's not all
Yeah.
just submod stuff. Also,
So there's also the mediator that I've redone because Osritzel hated his other mediator. The impeller is from Fractal Sponge, so we're doing a Fractal Sponge submod. Then this is the Rook. I'm just gonna call it the Rook.
Consonant fighter, as any PR fan will call.
Yeah, it's the Galaxy's fighter, pirate fighter, and vanilla. This one's a little bit over poly, but you know, we're just going to ignore that.
Estimate modifier.
Shush. this one I just made real quick for the Hutt animation. Then a work in progress blue diver as well. Because again, Osritzel did not like the original blue diver model.
There's also a Viscount update coming in the future that isn't
Yeah.
being shown here, but
Yeah, he also did another Viscount or Viscount, and I don't think the Viscount needs to be updated, but he really wants it to be updated, so might as well just do that.
there's also a model he did specifically for Ascendancy, like an Ascendancy version of it, because we have more limited poly counts there.
Mm-hmm.
But
then, this is the Contender. Not textured yet because I spent a lot of time on the Impeller.
How long is
obviously.
this fella again?
They're like 3 kilometers or something.
Oh, basically a child, a baby.
Yeah. And then that's the Contender. And before people ask, yes, we got permission from Fractal Sponge to do all this stuff. He said he gave it the green light. So we still have to show him the results, I think. But yeah, we asked permission first before using his designs.
hear that, internet?
We do things right here.
I was gonna make
Yeah.
that joke, but
Oh, since I have you all in a
That was
room, I do
insulting.
have the main spreadsheet has that page of like asset permissions. So anyone who hasn't updated their usage rules on that, if you could go there and fill that in, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. This is the Legator. Legator. It's look.
They throw
Look,
bricks
you're
at
just
you.
making fun of. You're
Little more
just making fun of a
confirmed, little more
Hispanic
confirmed.
guy at this point. No.
No, you're just describing what Bob's going to be doing for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
I'll go
all the
back to the
fractal
Lego
stuff we
later
have.
so you can.
Yeah.
You're not
This
gonna
one's
live
like
that down
7,
now.
isn't it?
Yeah, that ship is possibly able to make it into Era 1. No promises. Era 1 FOTR because it is from a comic that takes place pre-Clone Wars. So
Alright, so Oz has also uploaded both the new Bothan thing he finished today and the Bothan thing that I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to pop those on if I can. So this is a Bothan Assault Frigate, not a Bothan Assault Cruiser. That is still its own ship. You already know what that is. This is a separate ship based on similar lines.
I will clarify in this case that frigate is more in the line of Carrack than like assault frigate.
Yeah.
Assault frigate.
This is from Legacy of the Force that it gets mentioned, I think.
Yeah, and it gets stats from something too.
Probably FFG.
This one's 300 meters.
It's
if I
not
remember
a FFG one, but
It's okay. Now we can also have a Bothan breakaway faction.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
for that you need an even bigger ship, which is what this is.
How convenient.
yeah, no. It looks like much like the Proficient. It's literally just it gets its stats in text for some armament crap. Yeah,
I do
general
like
size.
this a lot. This looks good.
So what's the name of this one?
This is the Bothan Star Destroyer. It doesn't have an actual name yet. Whether we end up wanting to assign actual names to the Bothan units, we'll have to figure that out at some point. But with a lot of these, you'll probably see them showing up in a mix of Revolt and Militia Forces and different progression paths for the Corellians and the Galactic Alliance. Some of them would probably be only available to one or the other, because Bothans were a big part of the Corellian Confederacy. So for the later era Corellians, that's probably where that shows up.
Crisis, something.
Corellia is going to be an interesting faction. But yeah, so that is most of what I've downloaded from everyone so far. Oh, I did show the no, I didn't. Here's the AAC. This is the updated AAC model Porto's been working on.
I also have another animation that I need to upload, but I'm gonna kill the music from that real quick.
And there was one more model that almost made it into point 2, but we decided to hold off on it. That Bob has worked on.
Dun dun dun.
So once I hide this, I can show this. So Bob, any
It's the
special
new-
Praetor stories?
It's the new big Dorito on the block. You know, it's
Conquest.
chunky, it's triangular, it's what everybody wants out of an Imperial ship, from what I can tell. I had a lot of fun doing the greebling on this. It's definitely some of my best greebling work.
Looks
in the
fantastic.
trenches, especially. And do you also have a render of the, or in-game shot of the other one?
I do. It's right here.
Oh, look, there they are. There they are together. So we have wide open mouth Praetor and your regular Praetor. So the carrier was pretty. It was also pretty fun to put together. Ignore the small fires in the hangars. And you know, Corey, you can always show these off in game if you want. They are in the dev build right now.
They are, but that would require launching the game, which maybe I will do later. But
that's fair
there's
enough.
also some other stuff that going into the game would show that we're not quite showing yet, because I think I left something very early testable that we're not quite ready to Dark Empire about. But
Right, of course. It would be a real shame to Dark Empire everywhere all over the stream.
That's disgusting.
But yeah, it was good fun to make these. Praetor 1 design is either going to be done by me or I'll give it to Guedo, make him do it. Or maybe Oz. Maybe I'll make Oz do it. We'll see.
So I did also download the hangar section, the front of the hangar section separately, if people want to see a closer look at some of the detailing there. This is the front section.
I scaled the hangars to primarily like the two main hangars there are designed to fit the Titan dropship, the one that carries multiple AT-ATs. The side hangars are generally meant to carry your more Sentinel landing craft kind of things. And then the two kind of tubular ones to the left and right of the kind of flat area, which have lights on the bottom and the top, are intended to be like freight docks for cruiser freighters to dump cargo in. Because when you're making this many hangars, you really have to think about actual uses for them. Otherwise, you just end up making a bunch of boxes that don't really mean anything.
I'm going to try to download that render from Porto.
Oh, yeah. And Guedo did a render of it.
Yes.
Multiple renders, I think.
Yeah, only one came out really good. I like
That's
how it
okay.
syncs
I'll
up with the
forgive you.
music. Thank you. But what's it called? Yeah. So I made one render with the Praetor that came out really good. It syncs to Attack on Titan music, but obviously that would destroy Corey's stream because anime music is pretty strict with where you use it. So
It's just so intense, like we wouldn't be able to
Handle
survive. Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
My ears would melt.
You could say it's Titanic. Haha. Anyway.
Oh god.
I see what you did there.
That hurt.
Yeah, I know it did. That was the point.
That's closer to a pun than you've done before, but it's still not quite because you're still. Okay.
And then you get half a point.
Most.
But yeah, that's all I have to say about that, I think.
So there's a Praetor.
Yep.
Yes. Quick animation because it's cool.
All right. In the time that we have been talking, somehow Revan's Revenge has made up the difference and has gone to 51% of the vote. So I guess that's what we're going to be looking at next. Is our second preview video of the 4. So I really thought we'd be going through a bit faster than we are. And
I'll point out, of course, everything in there is work in progress.
Yeah, so this
very susceptible to changes.
It's mostly just visual stuff. I didn't show off too much, not to spoil the whole thing for everyone. But you are about to see some early looks at some Revan's Revenge stuff and a bit of an overview on what to expect from the mod. Then we'll probably take a few questions on this one while going through some of the models as well. But we'll all see you. Revan's Revenge was first announced several years ago now, and while we've been slowly picking away at it in the background, it's taken a secondary focus to our already released mods Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic. In point 3, this is changing, and we aim to have the first release of Revan's Revenge in this cycle. The mod is planned to cover a pretty significant period of time, with initial releases covering from the early stages of the Mandalorian Wars up until about the end of Knights of the Old Republic 2, with Galactic conquest scenarios covering the Republic's war with the Mandalorians, their war with the Sith, as well as progressive maps covering both, and Infinity's maps that cover a conflict between the Republic, the Sith, and the Mandalorians. It's not impossible that in the future we'd expand into content from other eras, like the period from the Old Republic MMO or Tales of the Jedi, but those would typically be in their own separate scenarios and will not be a focus for now. As with all of our projects, content that fits the timeline of the mod, originating in sources like those or even later ones, will be equally considered for inclusion. With all of our mods, we try to synthesize the source material of as many different places as we can, and that'll continue to be true here. On both the timeline and content side, there will be plenty of room for expansion as we go, but our goal with the first release is to get everything up to a minimum level, and define the general gameplay of each faction. Future releases will then iterate on that from there the same way we do with our other mods. Each faction will have a pretty broad set of infantry roles, though probably less art for those different roles than we'll have in the long term, as well as a minimum of 5 space units, a set of basic fighter and bomber options, and 5 ground vehicles, along with a good amount of heroes. Each faction will get its own overview video as the assets get finished. I've already done one for the Republic, for example, in space, but we've made quite a lot of progress on the art front already, especially with Philoraptor having focused recently on the ground assets for this mod specifically. As it stands, 13 of the initial 15 planned space units have been modeled, with 9 of those textured. Basically every ground unit is already modeled, with the majority of them textured and animations done as well, along with a few additional completed bits of content like a couple heroes, the Ebon Hawk, and the Republic Lander. Keep in mind, this is the minimum we want to have the mod at a basically functional level, rather than the limit of what we'd include in a first release. We'll almost certainly have another few units in for each faction on top of that, but we also want to make sure we leave enough room for us to be able to work on some of the other elements of the mod. Things like additional station types, dropships, the Starforge, and so on. The mod is still in its very early stages, but with the assets we've already built up, and the pipeline we have for other parts of development, the next couple months should see a lot of progress in getting the mod to a playable state, so expect to see several more updates going deeper into various elements in the near future. You'll be able to see those by following the news channel in our Discord, linked in the description, or subscribing here. Right, we are back. That's the first Revan's Revenge stuff. I'm going to put on a video of all of the Revan's Revenge renders we currently have, and then there is a work-in-progress Sith texture to show you as well. But, yeah, so generally, all of the Republic stuff in space is done. Well, except for some fighters. Most of the Mando stuff in space is done. Most of the ground stuff is also done, so there's...
Yeah. We don't know what final sizes will actually end up being at release anyways, because...
So yeah, there are... So Philoraptor, especially in the last few months, has been basically trying to get every single ground unit for the mod done, which is why ground is in the state it is now. So we need to update some of the infantry models. There are some newer versions of the Ages of Star Wars mods that we being AOS Ages of Star Wars, a different EAW mod made years ago that I was part of, that we're pulling some models from, so the infantry ones, because they were pretty good. But we have a lot of the assets we need for the first release done. But yeah. So that's what? 9 of the 15 space ones I said, and about 15 of the 15 ground ones, almost.
14 of the 18.
So not quite 100% done, but that is also, again, the basic number that we'd want rather than a limit. So we'll probably end up with more stuff, like the Quartermaster is pretty high up in priority. But anything you want to throw in about those, Philoraptor, while we're looking through all of it?
Yeah, now we're starting with mine. So this is the only one of the original ones that isn't textured yet. So of the original 15, or expanded them to 18. Probably once they're done to 21. But yeah, this was a tank droid from Kota 2. And those are the Republic ones. So speeder bike focused, at least from what I initially planned. So the bigger units are more, well, weaker, I guess, than the ones that the Mandalorians have, at least. This one is one of the most recent one. It's from the Tales of the Jedi series, skiff that shows up there. It now turns into a medical van, something like that. This one is also no skip, but it's a speeder bike with missiles, so that's probably gonna be mostly a V for the Republic.
Yeah, so I grouped all these by faction. The Sith in space have 4 of their 5 basic models done by Acerritzel. Slever did a material set for them recently, and Porto is starting the first skin there, but we'll be looping back through a lot of the ground stuff again in a moment. We got the Centurion, Darafan, Supremacy, and Sith Interdictor. So this is a question that gets asked a lot. There will be some presence of the Interdictor and Centurion for the Republic, especially in the Mandalorian Wars Galactic Conquest, but it'll mostly be limited production or story rewards. So, Vile, do you want to talk a bit about these, the creepy crawlies for the Sith? The Slayer and Mammoth? I think those are their names. I will load up the work in progress Sith Interdictor as well.
I like that one. That one's neat.
So this will loop back through in a moment, but I will throw up the first Sith space whip for the larger ships that Porto is working on based on Slever's material.
Oh, okay. Philo's not here, so we're AFK. The Sith stuff is from Sith Compendium, which is...
Yeah, so these are the Sith walkers that are about to be up that you were talking about there. So
it's a Star Wars Gamer 5 article done by Michael McKellen, and it has a variety of Great Hyperspace War era Sith assets, including large walkers, some large sentries, warbots. They're basically Sith alchemy, expensive, large battle droid, organic hybrid tank thingies.
Sorry, my internet broke itself.
Okay, yeah, if you want to go further into the Sith walkers, then feel free to go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so they were from Image. One was a background unit, the bipedal one, that I decided, well, let's do that as well. It fits the art style of the front one, so we got some out of it. I think there was also already something in the text above it mentioned that we then used that design for. So that was the War Mammoth, and the quadrupedal one, the beetle, is the Sith Slayer. So, and kind of like the Dark Empire droid starfighters, it's brains in droids, so the usual Sith weirdness.
Big scary side alchemy monsters, basically, but cyborg style.
I'll try to pull up some of them individually now.
They look like Killick stuff.
Yeah. So this one is the War Mammoth. I think this one's about 8 meters tall, Philo.
Yeah, I think so. I think 8 or 9.
Yeah,
So,
and then the other one is 12.
The Sith are kind of tricky because they are technically a bunch of different groups in different arrangements. Like it's not a direct through line necessarily between Revan Sith, the Great Hyperspace War Sith, and the later Sith, but there's connective elements for all of them. And well, we have to be a bit more broad in how we set up the initial rosters. As things get fleshed out more, part of the Sith government mechanics will involve getting some of the older stuff brought kind of back into the fold, or rediscovering some older Sith tricks. So that's how some of it's going to be tied together, that you may not necessarily expect to be all part of the same group initially. We do have to be a little bit more broad in how we put stuff together, just because of availability of everything. But here's the Slayer.
Because there's stuff that they make originally, then there's defected Republic assets, then there's old Sith stuff that they shove in for lack of other options, and then there's Crave, and then
Like
old
the
Vercaden stuff too, by some sort of things. Yeah, there's a variety of different disparate groups in Revan's little coup.
Yeah, like there's so the Krath after the earlier wars end up kind of like dispersed throughout the Outer Rim. So at the start of a Galactic Conquest as the Sith, it's later on, once we have the mod more established, you'd probably expect a few planets with like some Krath forces on it and a government mechanic related story event to kind of bring them back in and get some of the ships that way. But yeah. So was the cockatrice and all the other Basilisk stuff in this render? I forget.
They're in the channel, but I don't know if you put them in the specific video.
I think I did. I'll have to look back through for the... Well, you know what? I'll just open them back up individually. Because especially the animated stuff shows up a bit better once you have a chance to actually look at it more directly. I'll also throw up the Altieri with Arios' first texture here. This is because this wasn't in the preview video with the rest of the Mandalorian units. This is the fourth one of theirs that we've finished of their initial 5, because the Kiramud, the Javier, and the Kandosi were in the in that preview video we showed. This wasn't ready when I started recording that. It's not in game quite yet either. But this is one of their 4.
This is basically a sourcebook mentioned ship assigned to a comic design. Yep. So
glad that it turned out good.
Yeah,
it's a really good, especially for a first texture. This is really quite good. Let's see. Let's open the other animated ones. So all the fun running around, throwing grenades at stuff in KOTOR you can recreate with all the war droids. There are
the extremely awkward Geth.
Yeah. Oh shit! No, I'm showing the Mass Effect renders. Stop.
It's a Hunter prototype.
So there are a bunch that are seen in the actual game itself in KOTOR, but there are a few that are like implied by version numbering that kind of filled some gaps in with as well.
Yeah, and based on the concept art for the game. The last one, the Mark III.
That there was a concept art piece not used, and that there was a mark not used in the game was kind of a nice little. May as well use that moment.
Also give them an AV option that's not tied to anything.
Yeah.
And another one of the really common questions with the Mandalorians is like, oh, are you going to use the Basilisk from this, or this? And the answer, rather than picking one, is yes. Yes. There's room for all of them in different places. It's not really out of the realm of like, it's not weird that the same or that different things would have the same name.
Yeah.
And there's ways to use all of it. So
run a bit on this.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there's basically we'll be using each individual type of basilisk. We'll just have one use, of course, because we don't like to mix ground and space stuff beyond like transports and some occasional hero bits. So any ground combat model mass basilisks will just be used in ground combat, be that as gunships, speeders, later options. And then the space ones, we'd use the dedicated space ones seen in like some of the tour art as the bombers or the KOTOR comic dedicated space combat versions, as opposed to throwing like the primary repulsor lift based ground ones into space for referencing. Because, yeah, we just use each individual one for one specific role, and they'll have different stats and everything.
Yeah. This is, so Ghostfish just asked in the chat, this is a ground unit, this Basilisk.
Yeah. This is basically kind of the expected one when somebody says Basilisk War Droid, so it's a gunship, basically, in ground combat terms.
But there are also other Mando units that have the same kind of mech beast theme, like the Baragwin and the Cockatrice.
Yeah, this one was Philo running with the... There's a kind of weird Mandalorian turtle mech blurred out in a Tales of the Jedi panel. So he ran with that with a Baragwin purchase battle tank mention and the general Basilisk style and made this.
I like it.
Philo, of course, feel free to scrap your unit.
Yeah, it was kind of really just a blur somewhere. So it's mostly my design in that sense. The only thing you could really make out that it has a longer head and presumably 4 legs. At first I wasn't quite sure if it had 4, but I then decided 4 is probably best, since all of these legs with the pipes and everything are kind of intensive on the poly counts. So while I originally hoped maybe let's do 6 to make it fit with the normal Basilisk, I then decided no, it's more likely that it's intended to have 4 legs, so let's just stick with the smaller option and stay as close to in budget as possible. I think it's still over budget in terms of police, but not too badly.
And something
Well,
else getting... Sorry, go.
I was going to say, in general, I think Revan's Revenge is going to be smaller scale in a number of ways, so we can go a little bit fancier on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and something that's asked a lot that I'll just answer is the KOTOR 2 Basilisk. The tentative plan for that would just be treat it as a heavy space fighter type, and then throw a tongue-in-cheek reference into the description of meant to be a Basilisk replacement. We need not go further than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a design, we may as well use it, especially in an era where it's not exactly as swimming in options compared to Clone Wars or GCW.
And here's the third of that kind of style of unit for the Mandalorians. So, you want to talk about this one at all, Philo?
Yeah, that's basically Tor Basilisk. Because in Tor, even though the normal Basilisks are kind of supposed to be gone by that point, you can still get some kind of Basilisk that's kind of close to the normal Basilisk, but also quite distinct in some other aspects. It's a lot more squared, especially with the tail. And so I decided to run with the idea that basically the Tor Basilisks are fake Basilisks that are basically these cockatrices, which are, well, KOTOR era. Another walker that's in a similar line, but they were more abundant, and you are not destroyed after the war, so you could just refit them and make them look like normal basilisks afterwards. And so this one is missing the wings, some claws, and the missile tubes. And the Tor version would get them, but the KOTOR version doesn't have them yet, because at that point they're still, well, officially a separate unit.
And then 1,000 years later, you have the super heavy Mandalorian walker here, right? This is definitely a big Mandalorian walker.
And my internet is coming again.
So this is Evil Dark Empire stuff. Era. We'll hide that now. So we have... Okay, looks like people want the Era updates video next. I did see someone earlier asking why there was no Imperial Reign option on the vote. That is because there's not an Imperial Reign preview video to show today. We've shown off some models. There will eventually be some Imperial Reign stuff to show. But if I showed any Imperial Reign stuff, I'd be showing it to the rest of the team at the same time as to all of you. And then they'd be like, hey, that's shit. Why are we doing this? And then we'd have to have a whole conversation on the stream about what that's going to look like. But so we're not doing that today. But that means we can go to preview on how we're changing eras and imperial regimes. So enjoy that, and we'll be... The era system has been a staple several years ago now, and while we've been slowly... That was awful. What was still showing on that? Oh, that's why. Okay. I'm gonna retry that. It'll work this time. Been a staple of Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic since basically the first releases. And while the era system... Nope, not gonna work this time.
I guess Ascendancy wins.
I'm not sure why it's not showing the video now. It was working like 5 minutes ago when I was trying to test it. Did it just break?
Chat had their chance.
The era system has
We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Ah, I'm back. So, sorry, once again, internet.
It's all good. The stream's breaking, so.
Well, one video's breaking. The stream's fine. Mode. Nothing above that. Just gonna change this. If I just reload the video into it, then maybe it'll work properly.
The old turn it off and turn it back on again.
It usually works. Alright, I won't mute us this time until it starts. Nope, the video isn't wanting to play.
It's heartbroken that chat chose the other one first.
That could be it. Well, the audio will play. It's the video that's not showing. Oh, I think this is why. The era system has been a staple of Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic since basically the first releases. And while at its core it has a lot of good elements, there are some parts of it which either don't hold up with other content, or which don't work well in other ways in Thrawn's Revenge. For example, tying future progression of eras like the Yuuzhan Vong War to Imperial leaders wouldn't make the most sense. After all, having to kill Pellaeon to start the Yuuzhan Vong War or something would be a bit weird and doesn't have the most logical progression. Similarly, having so much content for all the factions tied to the Empire means the Empire always has to be on the progressive maps, and there's less internal control over what happens for the other factions when playing as them. To solve these problems, we're separating the eras of Thrawn's Revenge from Imperial leadership, making the era system play more like it does in Fall of the Republic, while making Imperial leadership its own thing with a bit more fluidity. This primarily makes factions more able to progress on their own terms, and have some content more reliably able to show up in game, where technically some stuff could show up week 5 right now if you rush down Imperial leaders, or you could have to wait until week 160 if you don't, or even later. So to start off the explanation of how each of these features works now, start by forgetting what you know about the eras. They are two separate features. In Thrawn's Revenge, time will pass as years, which you may be familiar with from the real world. Weeks have been renamed to months, and after choosing your starting date, you'll progress through the years every 12 months, and you'll always be able to see what year it is on the galactic map. The starting years you're able to choose remain based on the important breakpoints used to define eras in the past. Some characters, research options, and events become available as the years progress, like Jason and Jaina Solo, Tenel Ka, and other younger citizens of the Star Wars galaxy, rather than trying to work out a system where they have to care about who's leading the Empire. Events like the Yuuzhan Vong invasion also get more likely the closer you get to their in-universe starting date of 25 ABY. In many progressive games, players lose out on a lot of content if they start too early, and it can be tricky to try to assign some content to eras when someone like Pellaeon was technically in charge for decades, and when there will be some maps without the Empire on it at all, but where progression is still wanted. In those cases, even where the Empire was killed off early, progression was already kind of just time-based, but it was time-based in a way that was really extended and didn't make the most sense for some of the events, so by separating them, we're able to have it be a lot more reasonable to go through that content even as the timeline of the mod gets expanded. For the Empire's part, without their core government mechanic being relied on so heavily by the rest of the mod, we have a lot more freedom to have a more dynamic system for how they progress. The basics of the system will be the same. You'll have your leader and associated units and heroes, and from there, if they die or you overthrow them, a new one will appear. they will no longer leave on a timer outside of a few specific circumstances which we'll cover in the future. Dark Empire also works significantly differently now, but that'll get its own video later. For certain leaders, you'll have multiple choices for how you're able to progress. For example, from Pestage, you'd be able to support either Isard or side with a new Imperial leadership option, the Central Committee of Grand Moffs. If you decide to go with neither, that's a possibility and it wouldn't lock you out of later options, but it may have other consequences. Basically, it's possible to skip entirely past what used to be specific eras and go between different leaders that way. All in all, it leaves room for a lot more freedom and options as the game progresses, and gives the player more control over how they make choices. Once all the different options for progression are more fleshed out in-game, we'll have another dedicated news post going over exactly how all the options will look, as well as a more detailed look at some of the events that can happen on a timed basis now. As we work to add more story content to the mod, there will be a variety of different ways that certain things can be triggered or not. That's going to do it for our first look at split eras and regimes though. To get more mod news and see it in action as it's developed, make sure to subscribe here or to check out our Discord linked in the description. Alright, so there's that. So yeah, basically every 12 weeks, or 12 months, the year changes. Sometimes that'll come with new events, sometimes it won't. But it's just a way for us to be able to distribute those events in a way that makes a bit more sense and not have the whole game rely on the Imperial leadership being there or not. Because that gets tricky when you're trying to introduce people based on ages. So I've seen a few questions in chat about like, oh, well, what if is there a shortened version of that? But keep in mind, for 40 years, so if you're trying to cover all 40 years of the game, or of the period the mod covers, that is maximum 480 weeks. And generally, there wouldn't be as much time-based events, or as many time-based events towards the end of that, because most of that is based around like character ages. For things like the Swarm War, the Yuzon Vong War, Corellian Confederation, those aren't time-based. Those are based on other factors in the game. So they have ways that they can happen much earlier. And you will, of course, be able to start in later eras with like you can start in the Yuzon Vong War once that content is added. You can start in the Second Galactic Civil War once that content is added. And again, keep in mind that eras as they were don't really exist in the same way. So it's not like if you are playing the game and you get from 4 ABY to 6 ABY, that the Empire is forced out of Isard or something. Those are no longer connected. So yeah, this is the World Devastator, because I did mention the Dark Empire is going to work slightly differently. Because Dark Empire is no longer connected to that standard regime progression. It is something that is tied more to legitimacy and available for all factions, but exactly what that is going to look like will get its own update video.
Well, all Imperial factions. Could you imagine a Dark Empire corporate sector authority?
That's why I said in the last preview playthrough that I did, where I accidentally integrated the Empire with Palpatine because it wasn't checking the right object, that I was spoiling something. Because it's kind of like that.
Granted,
with more
Triton,
stuff.
You say that like CSA wouldn't be completely happy to go for it anyways. Wait, we get money? We can make the World Devastators print money? Yes, sign us up.
You accidentally have a bug where NR becomes the Dark Empire.
I do kind of, now that we mention it, have a really, 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 really small meme chance for it to happen to CSA, but that's probably a no.
No, that's probably not happening.
I know.
So there's some more Dark Empire content. Got some Shadow Droids, 2 versions of them. Also very often requested units.
The World Devastator on the screen was, of course, not the typical design that people see. It's Dark Empire sourcebook stats to the different sizes and like subtypes. That one's the 1700 meter destroyer and design. The classic like 3200 meter one's the more typical one that people think when they think World Devastator.
Yeah, so there will be a few variants that you'll be able to go through. There will be a bit of a progression system per World Devastator. We haven't worked out exactly how it's going to work, and what the effects are going to be. So
Yeah,
TBD
like
on
the
some of that.
smallest ones they put into combat are like 600 meters ish or so, generally. But
I think that's the size of that World Devastator. Last time I checked was 600 meters.
well, the one you put there is the 1700 meter one. There's
I'm pretty
it's
sure
six.
in the model size it's 600.
It is the 1700 meter design, and I've definitely scaled that for Rosebud.
Okay, well I'll check. But
There is a 600 meter version, but I don't think Oz did a model for it ever. They're not here. We can't really. Maybe
yeah,
it is that.
that one is 700 meters.
Is it? Okay. I could be confusing the two, because I know the trunk is very much on the 1700 as well. Did you do the small one thing? Or?
That is the small one.
Well, no, because there's. The standard
Oz
proves the
is
point.
in
Yeah,
chat
they're
saying
all-
the 600 meter version is still work in progress.
Alright. Well, that
Yeah.
that one needs to be scaled up then.
But okay, so Farshot was doing a higher res version of this, but I'm not sure if he wants me to hold off on this or not. There are two other things being redone.
You should hold off.
Okay.
I'm just rendering it right now.
Okay.
You could show off the
It'll
other
be
one
safe.
then.
I can. I will do that. There are two other things that haven't been done in a while that needed it. And I gotta say, your rendering skills for this one were kind of shit. Like, you could have done better. I'm very disappointed.
Sorry, Dad.
Like, you can't even see anything here. What is this?
Oh, you're asking me? Well, I don't know. It kind of eclipses the view. It's the eclipse.
That
It's
was,
still
on the nose.
it's still a super big work in progress. I have to go through a training arc to greeble it up because I kind of want to make the ship extremely special to the mod.
He has to render the weights so he can make an animation of it moving up and down.
Yeah.
Eye of the Tiger's plane.
So yeah, it's just basically a silhouette right now. Farshot really helped out with that, so props to him as well. But yeah, hopefully the eclipse is something that everyone likes and lives up to the comics.
You have to pick one.
I will do both.
I'll put these back up. So yeah, I guess the big announcement at the end of that is that you can in fact be the Moffrents, the long-awaited branch between choosing Isard or choosing the Moffrents there. So I guess I should open up some of these maps now, because we've kind of talked about that enough. But this is what you're going to see first is the medium-sized known galaxy map for Era 1. So with all the maps being redone, we can make it now with the new way we load the Galactic Conquest so that you can have different planet layouts for every different era. Like I mentioned in the first video, this is what it looks like in Era 1. As you go through the eras, it'll probably skew a little bit more towards the north. But again, we can pick planets that aren't just going to be New Republic, New Republic, New Republic all the way through Era 7 and onwards. But you'll notice with the affiliation here, if you have really good eyes, that Typhera and Kessel are both neutral. The way they are going to work now is for the Empire, when you pick which of those two places or which of the two leaders you want between Isard and the Moffrents, you get either Kessel or Typhera. So if you pick Isard, you get Typhera. If you pick the Moffrents, you get Kessel, the Central Committee of Grand Moffs. And the other one goes to Warlord forces with the other set of heroes that you didn't choose. So different hero options, probably some different units or other bonuses based on which way you go there. And there will be some other differences in how you're able to progress for the other eras. There will be some that you're able to kind of bypass, some that you're able to do in different orders than you'd normally expect, because again, it is now not being relied upon by everything else in the mod, so we're a bit more free to do stuff that makes more sense internally for it. And this will also mean in some way that the Empire of the Hand will end up with the option to keep Thrawn, which they sometimes like, because apparently he's a good hero or something, without having to resort to the clone. But since this is the medium known galaxy one, this is the medium full galaxy one, so a few different planets. Some of the initial work on an unknown region setup. So you can see the Chiss territory there, the Empire of the Hand territory there, some Killik territory, Siruvi. So that's kind of the difference between known and full. And there is so for each of the progressive maps, so for the full and known galaxy, there are 3 different sizes in the main mod. There is one with 90 planets, one with 120, and one with 160, I think. The full galaxy version has 10 more planets than the known galaxy version. So there's a ton of different options with that, times however many eras there end up being with any particular release. So there's literally dozens of different map starts that you can play with different assortments of factions, different progression options, and it's all very fun and complicated and really, really fun to code.
There's some additional CRV planets that I don't think are on that version of the
Yeah, right. So there are 2 more Siruvi planets that are supposed to be on this right now, named, I think it was Daki and Shri that we went with. So basically taking the names of some of the ships and turning them into planets for their core territory, the way that the WEC class already was. So we
we know
it
they had
there.
core territory of like actual Dino things as opposed to the more recently grabbed stuff like Grow, and we have one instance of planet names and it is a ship, so we ran with that theme.
So yeah, yeah, and Barshot just sent the last Dark Empire preview to look at before we load into the rest of the maps we'll look at there. And let's see. If I can find where I saved it. I found it. I'm the greatest.
Hooray.
So this is another SSD that has been in need of a model update for quite some time. So, Farshad, if you want to talk a bit about this one.
It's the Sovereign, and
well, good points.
I'm doing the Sovereign again. You're welcome.
So the Sovereign's only canon image is a silhouette. So there's kind of a lot of freedom on how to address that. Any deep dives into the choices you made here? Anything that really gets to the core of you as a person and the Sovereign as a person?
The Sovereign in silhouette is a very thick ship. So
with a K or 2 C's?
Multiple C's.
Okay.
Yes.
I opted to, continue my exploration of Fractal Sponge's style of big ship building. So kind of with the Mandators, pooling from adjacent SSD inspirations or whatever. So there's a little bit of Executor, Executor, take your pick. In the cityscape detailing, obviously. Also in the part I did yesterday the most was a lot of that engine area greebling in there. It'll be pretty similar looking to this Executor there too. And I've been rebuilding. You can see there's a couple mesh errors near the top behind the bridge, below the bridge, where there's kind of like no structure there. I've been rebuilding that area from what I had before, so I could make it a little bit more asserter, mandator, Bellator-y, rather than how I had it. And then the bits below that are the most inspired by the Eclipse, as well as obviously the Prow. So, as Puerto moves along with the Eclipse, I'm kind of hoping we keep collaborative on it and kind of have some details. similar between the two, since obviously the Sovereign's sort of like the Eclipse's little brother. So I think my next big part that I'm gonna work on is start building out all the greebling around the super laser, because obviously you can see in the render it's a very basic, there's just like a tube there, but I'm planning to have a bunch of technical greebly parts up in there to fill out the shape, so it won't look quite so bird beakish, we'll say.
Right. Very epic. So it's some Sovereign update coming to a Thrawn's Revenge near you in Avengers Endgame. But there's one more image that does have it's an older image, but it does check out because it still has some of the World Devastators on for anyone who might have missed it when it was originally posted. So to fit in with all the epic Sovereign and Eclipse updates with the rest of the World Devastators.
This is a rather. Most of these are in now. Is the thing.
So there's actually some of the Chiss units along the front row there. You can see 2 of the World Devastator versions.
And the wingless, of course, which is sat basically ready to be used, but with nowhere to go for a long time now.
Yep.
I might just end up redoing that texture. I think for the big World Devastator, I think Oz wanted to redo that, so it'll probably look a little bit different when you guys get it. So,
but it's at least showing kind of what the status of those would be.
And seeing stuff in 3D is nice.
Just before I forget, with the Bakuran Star Destroyer off to the left, I've still got that Bakuran fighter lingering if anyone wanted to texture it at any point and put it in.
Yeah, GPAF is always nice.
Yeah, that'll probably get some priority with other local force updates as well. But so one of the things I mentioned in the initial video was that we have our internal repository of 600 plus planets at this point. I forget the exact number, where it is all set up. We have like all these listed by their affiliation throughout the different eras. And so
652.
652 now. It'll probably be over 700 by the time we actually release 0.3. But this time lapse shows how they change over the eras. So basically, when choosing the progressive maps or when building any of the maps, we look at this as one of the resources to see like which planets are both where and controlled by who as you go through. And yeah, it's a ton of work to set all this up, but
it's a lot of scouring the Essential Atlas, Essential Guide to Warfare.
Yeah.
Guesswork.
This is
dice.
usually Bob and I doing it.
Yeah. But Slawney has obviously done a huge amount of work with the display and the behind the scenes stuff for a lot of this as well. So really thankful.
Slawney basically figured out most of the northern unknown regions from.
Yes. Yes, you should
Which
post his ridiculous maps sometimes, Corey, which are a lot like the classic.
Look, no, because
it's
I'm
always
posting mine, so we're not doing that.
What you do is it looks like the "It's Always Sunny" meme with the guy waving his hands around the string and the board.
Yeah,
it looks like that basically.
Northern UR, the basis for that is mostly Slurny basing it on Zan stuff, which is more modern and early, but we've set our take on that in several times at this point. More general UR stuff was me going through sourcebook mentions of, and some novel stuff for certain powers in position to each other, which mostly at that point was just Ascendancy or EOTH, and then like Helix, Siruvi, Dark Worlds, Summercat and archaeological stuff, some of Magnus's crap, and some of the Randite things in relation to each other, and then a few individual planet mentions.
Yeah, so since it's coming up a lot in chat, I I know most people are memeing right now about the whole, like, oh, do a map with all the planets. I think some people are doing it seriously. But aside from general issues with that, we will potentially do a sub-mod with a bigger size of map. We don't want to go above the large 160 planets in the default mod, because the way a lot of that stuff basically ends up working is people, when they load up the mod for the first time or any time, they will always go for whatever the biggest map available is, no matter how many disclaimers you put in about the fact that EAW doesn't handle it the best. So it'll be really laggy or it'll be less fun. And people will always go to that. So they'd basically end up hating the mod just because of that. But for people who really want it, there will probably be official sub mods going even bigger, especially now because we have this as a resource. We have our Galactic Conquest editor that we're able to use internally and will hopefully be able to put out a public release of that is more usable for people who don't necessarily know how to do everything already.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Someone will, of course, make a mod with every planet and then remove the hyperlanes and just re-enable the fleet distance jump, because that will not be chaotic at all.
Yeah.
It's the worst that can happen. But yeah, the big benefit of this is we can also set up a nice big plan to set up a starting force library where we just simplify the production of Galactic Conquests quite a lot by coming up with reasonable fleets for each location in each era, and then populating. And that will generally mean as well that we hope the historical GC starting forces will be a little less boring than they are right now. Fewer armies of two stormtroopers and an ATST around, probably. That's the hope, anyway.
2 army troopers and a chariot.
And finishing updates to make the starting forces more roster appropriate.
Yes.
I went through and did some replacements before we did the last release, but there was still some stragglers. There will always be some situations where we do intentionally use non-roster units for that, just for some extra flavor. But primarily, your starting forces should reflect what your roster is meant to do, which
or at least playstyle.
Yeah. So that'll all be worked on a bit more. But is that all of the stuff that I have been sent? I think it mostly is. So I'll go back to the map rotato for a second, because there was a bit more that Rhino uploaded that I don't think we've shown. So while we talk about any last stuff before we get to the Ascendancy thing. So anything else that the rest of you here want to bring up as we get towards the final preview?
Just rogue skirmish map. That's about it. Oh, and the new snow map as well.
Isla Nubla, the map
Yeah.
for EaWX.
I thought the picture was going to come up. But...
Well, I added them to the
Oh, you just
original
added it,
rotation
okay.
set. Yeah.
Yeah, so Rogue made Isla Nublar from Jurassic Park. First as a skirmish map, and then I converted it to a tactical map. And it's got all the Dinoraptor pad, I forget, the center thing with the T-Rex.
That'll
And-
definitely be a map for one of the Cerubi planets.
Yeah, here it is, yeah. So the Raptor pad. And then I think there's a paddock, which infantry, yeah, that's the paddock that infantry can go into with the gates that are open.
I was originally hoping to show off a bit of survival for this, but there's still a couple early on bugs to fix. So that'll be Dark Empire, how that exactly works and some of the content that's involved in that, and survival will probably be two of the things you can expect to see sooner than later, especially because there's an Imperial playthrough coming up, so that'll probably involve Dark Empire. Though there will be a bunch of assets for that aren't quite set up, because we will probably be getting to the Galaxy gun at some point in point 3, and that is not currently a thing yet. Ascend.
There's a couple stuff in anniversary streams.
Yeah, I've been trying to download those.
Okay.
And as usual, there's always background work going on in terms of things like the AI, and obviously the mappers, as you can see, are all putting in excellent work improving land maps. And oh look, it's a hunter-killer probot.
Yeah.
Hunter
Yeah.
killer.
I
It's
believe
the
Bob
same.
has updated the skirmish AI a bit.
Yes, so you can actually play against it now if you want.
And as Michael so helpfully keeps spamming in chat despite being requested not to keep doing so, we are aware that the mediator requires a fix. That fix has been made available in Discord for quite some time, and he has been made aware of this, I believe, repeatedly. The reason that we don't do repeated hotfixes for issues like that is because that can often mess with saves. And when we are receiving as many reports as we currently have been about saves already having issues, then we want to have as few issues, we want to have as few additional factors that can cause issues at the same time. Because that makes it much harder to determine where issues are coming from or what's happening with them. So we are aware that there are some bugs that have even been fixed. It's just we don't push the fixes for that because that can cause even more bugs. So yeah. But there we go.
And I've been like slowly doing skirmish stuff, but what gets done is right now my pace of work. So there might be ground war on TR, might not, depends if I can finish it.
Yeah, so we'll hopefully have at least one other new game mode in 0.3 as well. That's something that Rogue and I have been talking about for a while. But probably too early for tower defense to be properly announced. But this
For
is
this
another render.
Yeah, this render, it's basically I took a few instances of the convoy you see in the Hutt animation and duplicated it about like 40 something times. So there's several thousand ships, and I really like some other sci-fis that put in a lot of ships in their battles, like Legends of the Galactic Heroes. Has that sort of style, so you can expect more of those types of renders from me. And then the next render is something I'm working on the side, as well, which is basically just a Battle of Jakku animation. I'll hopefully get done this year. Who knows? That's kind of complicated, but
Speaking of Jakku, so this is still in the scene from last year. We are still doing the submod with the Starhawk. I had originally wanted to get that out in 0.1 and then update it for 0.2, but because of all the other stuff that had changed with 0.2 with how ships were balanced, it just didn't end up making sense to try to set it up in one version and then get to the next one. Since 0.2 won't have the same, or 0.3 rather, move everything I just said up a bit. But since 0.3 won't have the same systemic updates as 0.2 did for a lot of stuff, it's a lot easier for us to actually get the ship done and without having to do everything in two different ways. So we still need to figure out exactly how we want to handle the tractor beam situation for it, the special ability for it. But once we have that, it'll be updated in the MC75 submod, which will become a more broad cannon unit submod. So that should be within the next couple months that you get the Starhawk.
Oh, also, can I interject with I'm also it's been a minute since I touched it, but I am making the Starhawk from Squadrons as well.
Yeah, there were a few variants that you had that you were working on there. So I don't know if we'll have any of the other variants in the submod initially, so it'll just be this version at first, and then an Imperial Reign would be probably where we have more in-depth Starhawk stuff. There are people asking where other hotfixes can be downloaded. We generally don't do a bunch of those kind of hotfixes. We don't do like piecemeal stuff. This was one thing where we just showed people how to make the one specific fix. Otherwise, it's just wait for the official updates. There will hopefully be an opportunity to hotfix the mandator stuff or mediator stuff. But again, while we're dealing with reports of save crashes, we're not particularly eager to exacerbate that problem. Because like otherwise we'd have to start upkeeping a bunch of other places, and it's not worth it. Okay. I think that's most of that. And I guess that means it's time for the Ascendancy video. So Ascendancy is a mod we make for Sins of a Solar Empire. It hasn't had an update for a few years, and this is going to go over what you can expect for the next update and when you can expect the next update. So we'll be back for the last section after that. Star Wars Ascendancy, our mod for Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion, has gone without an update for quite some time. The mod, which converts Sins to the post-Andor period of Star Wars, last received an update in 2019, and while work has happened a bit in the background, progress has been slow. Despite this inactivity, there are still several things we hope to accomplish with the mod, so it is not dead. Part of the reason for the downtime is that I actually really hate the XSI mod tool, which is how you rig models for the game. So Evil Bob the Bob has been periodically plugging away at a Blender plugin, which has made the process far less annoying. So over the last little while, I have started a few model conversions. There are some more restrictions on Sins models compared to Empire at War. In terms of polygon counts, and textures are set up differently compared to Empire at War, so there's a bit more work to it than just popping in the same work we've done for Empire at War, but the Blender plugin definitely helps in that process. While updating old models is the primary short-term goal, there are still a bunch of other balancing issues and other types of content we want to address or expand on. Sins is at its best when it's played in multiplayer, so being able to quickly respond with targeted patches to specific balance issues is important. Unfortunately, with Sins, there's not much of a way to make these kinds of small updates and get them out to everyone without either fully re-uploading the mod on sites or manually having to have users replace individual files. To help address this problem and get the ball rolling with the project again, we're going to be changing how we handle mod development and releases for Ascendancy. Instead of periodic releases a long time apart, a live updating version of the mod will be available at all times through GitHub, a popular version control software development tool, which I'll show how to use for this purpose in this video. There will be messier development branches, but the main branch will remain a stable, playable, fully updated version for public use, and when we reach reasonable checkpoints, versions of the mod will still be uploaded to all the usual sites like Mod Database. Basically, we'll keep all the benefits of the original release structure, while also allowing ourselves to get more feedback faster, leading to more frequent releases. GitHub has also got a discussion page and issue reporting, but our primary avenue for feedback will remain our Discord server. To use GitHub, first you need to download the desktop client linked in the description. Once installed, go to the repository page linked in the description as well, click on the green button labeled Code, and choose the Open with GitHub Desktop option. You will be asked which folder to clone it to. Choose the mods folder indicated in-game in the SIDS mod tab. Usually this is found by navigating to Documents, then My Games, then Ironclad Games, Sins of a Solar Empire, then Mods-Rebellion version 1.9 something. Again, choose whichever is indicated in-game. The game will tell you exactly where you need to go. After you've chosen the file, you can click the clone button, and it will begin to download the mod. Once it's downloaded, you can run it like any other Sins mod. For anyone who is really struggling with this part, I will link a regular video on how to install Sins mods in the description as well. When you want to check for an update, all you then have to do is press the Fetch Origin button, which will automatically download any available updates. The left side of the screen additionally will have a list of changes. This is available right now, so I hope you're all looking forward to playing some Star Wars Ascendancy. I really enjoy the game and have missed playing it as much as I used to, so I'm hoping to get some more movement on the project in the near future. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the mod. All right, so that is what's going to happen with Ascendancy. Basically, I've asked repeatedly what the chances are of getting something like the Steam Workshop for Sins, and that it's not going to happen. But it's a game that I think really benefits from that kind of live ability to update. Because unlike Empire at War, games don't last super long. Like, you're only going to be playing in a couple sessions. So there's not the same fear of breaking people's saves. And it's actually a lot better with Empire at War for loading different files, adjusted files, from what I remember. So basically, this means that we're able to make balance changes whenever while we're still working on broader stuff. And every so often, there will be an updated version on the GitHub where I can either do small or large amounts of content. There will be other more in-development branches, like I mentioned, that will be messier and have more of the bigger content. But whenever that's stable and ready, that'll get pushed out to the version that's available to people by default. So that'll hopefully start amping up over the next little while. You might have to wait for the standalone version of that video to be posted to really do anything with it. I have made the repository open, but maybe I'll post the link on a few places. But it will be available within the next couple days. If you have not played Sins before, I do recommend it. If you like Empire at War, you'll probably like Sins, especially if you're more into multiplayer. It's kind of like Empire at War, where you have the galactic and tactical space battles. You don't have ground combat, but all the space stuff and galactic stuff is happening at the same time. You're moving your fleets between everything. There's less in-depth unit commands, but there are a bit more special abilities, a bit more in-depth on the Empire control stuff. There's some random event stuff. It's a fun game. So I do recommend checking it out if you're not familiar with it. I might even give away some keys on some streams. Maybe I can even ask Stardock about that. But
is this our first live service mod?
I mean, they're all kind of a live service mod, aren't they? We just don't get the money for it, which is very sad. But yeah, so that's Ascendancy. Mostly right now, I'm updating the models with the script that Bob very helpfully made to use Blender with it. Still some things we need to finish off with that, but yeah, so that should start moving along soon.
Yeah, it even kind of works sometimes.
I've mostly used it fine. The problem is just so the way textures work is the big difference, and the fact that you're limited to 64,000 total vertices per object, and unlike Empire at War, you can't have multiple objects per model file or per unit. So that part's less fun. There's some stuff you can kind of do with particles with it, but that's trickier. But anyways, I think that's all the stuff I had planned. Any other things the rest of you want to bring up?
Can we plug?
What's that?
Can we self-plug?
Go for it.
I've been uploading my animations to YouTube, and thankfully Corey has already made a community post about it. But if you like what you see here and some of the animations I've done for the team and whatever, you can go check me out at Mr. Puerto Rican on YouTube. And yeah, I'll be uploading animations every so often, so I hope you enjoy them.
So if any of you have anything else you want to either plug or mention for the mod or anything, I guess thank you all, both in the team, especially in the team, but also everyone who's enjoyed the mod for 16 years, for all your help, support, all of that stuff. It's been a long time, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad that the mod didn't die the many, many, many times I thought about stopping.
16 more years. No.
Oh God, please no.
No.
Don't forget, you are here forever. Including you,
Okay,
the
Corey,
audience.
it's only been just over half your life now.
Just over? It's 2 years over. Oh,
I
I'm
first heard
31
about
year
Fall
over.
Republic in elementary school.
Don't say that. Terrible wasn't even born yet.
Technically, the mod could drive in America now.
Yeah. It can drink in Europe, probably.
Most of the world it can drink.
Yeah.
It's not always easy. It's often kind of stressful, but I can't imagine where I would be without having done all the mod stuff. So
Yeah,
thank you all.
McDonald's still.
Well, that was I'd probably be a much better job earlier on, to be honest, but it would be a more boring job.
Less Star Warsy.
Yeah. All right. That, I guess, is going to do it then. Anything else jumping to mind for any of you that you want to...
And you could play skirmish if you wanted.
Yeah. I was going to mention legitimacy groups now have flavor text.
Oh yeah, that's actually something. Does that work in game yet? Or
Did when Nemesis tested it.
yeah, if somebody, Corey, maybe wants to try to rush that, that might be not a bad thing to do while we talk. But
I think I'd rush Dark Empire first, which is something would probably break. Because I had it set up to test like immediately for different factions.
Next preview playthrough.
That was a fun project where we said, "Oh, we'll do this over a long period of time," and then did it in 2 hours.
I guess if people want to ask questions in the chat, like we can be done the official part and still have some time to just answer questions or
AMA.
Just talk amongst ourselves about the fun of the last 16 years. So the first question there, Connor's asking, you ever thought of making your own game? That is a thing that occasionally does come up within the context of the team, as well as like some other places for me. It'd be a very different set of, like, we need to cover certain skills that we don't have now. A lot of us have no interest in either that kind of commitment or making this into, like, transitioning from mod development to any kind of career in game development. Like, we are all pretty happy with modding being our hobby. And like a common misconception for me is that like modding is my job, even among other modders in Empire at War who say that like, oh, well, the EaWX team does this as their job, or Corey does this as his job. And that's very much not the case. Even for me, this is still very much a hobby. Like the video stuff is my job. The streaming is my job, which does work really well with making the mod because it gives me something to play that I otherwise would, I don't know what I'd be playing instead, like more RimWorld or something. But it all the mod work comes on top of any of the video and streaming work for me and for everyone else's regular schooling or jobs. So going from what is an entirely hobby project to trying to work out an actual way to turn it into professional game development, because it would have, like, we wouldn't be able to make a game for free within reason. Like we'd probably have to do it as like an actual indie game that you have to pay for. Then you get into the whole like how do we divide who gets paid for what? We'd have to keep track of like actual work being done by each person more. It just turns the whole thing into more of a headache and doesn't usually go well when mods try to do that.
Yeah. Just from my end, I know a mod developer who's working on a game right now, and it sounds pretty tough. And like Corey said, you would have to pick and choose who would get paid for their work and who would not be able to contribute. And keep in mind that we are larger, significantly larger than a lot of indie studios and a lot of indie games. So we would probably be at the size of a AA studio, and none of us really have the money to fund a AA studio. So yeah, it's not really something that is practical.
Plus, it certainly wouldn't be Star Wars, and it might not even be RTS.
Yeah.
So anyone looking for this kind of, for us essentially to reproduce Empire at War Expanded in a brand new game engine, that's definitely not happening.
Yeah.
God, imagine the sick pay Corey would have to pay out for this proof.
Also, I'll just ask, did you call us fat?
Yes.
I mean, just the mental health coverage bill for the team, we'd be bankrupt day one.
Yeah. Someone else asked, Oh man, I just lost the question.
There was
Uh,
comments about generic Jar Jar.
Generic
Generic
haircuts?
Jar Jar.
What about Jar Jar?
Generic
Jar
Jedi.
Jar?
There we go.
Do you remember the content of the question, or was the
Was
question
it-
just
what-
generic Jedi question mark?
Are there going to be any changes to generic Jedi?
Well,
Yeah.
the stuff that we showed off last year that I started to work on before I got swamped again, like a month ago.
Yeah, they are getting a more holistic update.
Yeah, basically, like I actually started the stat and stuff for those last month, and then, well, I've been busy, so we'll see.
Yeah, ultimately the plan is to make them more survivable, have more interesting force powers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
not
of
just
course,
be a
the
bunch of
main-
Luke screams running around waiting to happen.
Yeah. Of course, the variation
Oh god,
kind
the
of
Luke
depends on artists. So, yeah.
The worst part of Ground War was the Jedi group when you land, like, have 10 of them out and they all start dying.
Mm-hmm.
Just the echoes of
Marmar was asking, are you guys going to scale the Starhawk based on the official stats or the shield dill sacks?
What?
I mean, the generators actually, the sensors matched the official thing decently when.
I think
people
she's
match-
thinking about the Scrungle. There was the whole
Gesundheit.
thing with squadrons where, before.
Well, the Squadrons one is prototype, which has its own thing, anyways. That Proto First Shot and I worked out. So
Are we literally talking the scale here, or are we talking like the weapon statting and
the
stuff?
we did
statting,
both.
the stat scaling, but like there's
We did both.
so for any place that gives ship stats, there's always some sort of conversion you have to do to make it consistent with everything else, or else we'd have Carracks that are simultaneously better than Nebula Star Destroyers and worse than individual starfighters.
Just take all the supremacy stats.
Yes. Do you not like your Nova Cruiser being worse than an Immobilizer 418?
But also somehow better than a Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
I was also
Wizards is just whack for
there's also
vehicle
someone
stats.
on the Discord to get the mediator fixed.
Isn't it pinned in like the Thrawn's Revenge chat somewhere? I don't know.
Someone else asked what's the hardest or what's the most painful part of modding EAW? Probably people. Yeah. Probably people.
People.
Yeah.
Having to
You
deal
know,
with poetic puns.
love the fans, obviously, but sometimes there's always, that one negative person. And when you do content creation, it doesn't matter if you get like 100,000 positive comments, you'll always see the negative one the most. So
Yeah,
that's
it's not
always
like
probably the hardest part.
it's not even like criticism like, oh, I don't like this thing. There's always someone who just gets like really shitty about something or acts really entitled about it, and then if you're like, hey, if you don't like it, you don't have to play it, or if you like clap back at them at all, it's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
All I
Yeah,
did
we're not
was
getting-
say you should
we're not
die in a
getting paid
pit,
for anything.
and here you are being rude to me, the customer who paid nothing. And it just goes on like that for 10 pages of Steam discussion. That goth nerd, that's you I'm calling out there. Good job.
Oh, I should have had the bleep button ready. But yeah, it's that stuff. And then I know I clapped back at someone, and then they kept harassing me for months on
Yeah.
Mod DP, which I don't even check that
Yeah.
often.
Is that the same guy that was like following around every Reddit comment I made, or is that a different person?
It was a different person to recollection.
I think it was a different person because I told them to fuck off when they
What
s-
here
they
is that
asked-
there are multiple people that we have to ask, was it this?
Yeah, I told them to fuck off because they kept asking for redone clones, and I said no. So, and they kept asking for months. This wasn't like a sporadic Mr. Porto is a dick moment. So
Like, unsurprisingly, thing made for RTS game, we're not going to rip a modern first-person shooter mod asset.
you-
Looks at other mods.
you can look at different modern RTS games or any modern strategy now, and they'll have similar poly budgets for their bipedal models. So like you can look at Anno 1800. I think they have lower poly models, and then Steel Division 2, done by Eugen. They also have similar polygon limits for people. So
On a less annoying note, I would say the most painful thing about modding, in terms of the actual work itself, is probably doing extremely repetitive things with little chance of automation.
Mhm.
There are certain things that you just can't.
Never mind. Keep going. Sorry.
There are certain things that you just have to do again and again and again and again, and it's the same in game development to a certain extent, but especially with the scale we're doing things at. I'm both looking forward to and dreading doing the starting forces, for example.
Yeah.
Because it's in many ways it's one of the most fun parts, because we can come up with like all these fun little fleets, they'll be really representative and so on. But then you have to do that for 650 planets times however many eras there are, and then it starts to get a little more
That's
less fun.
That's like the ground one supremacy design stuff as well.
Yep.
There's also like for me the biggest thing is debugging, because one of the things that I've really had to try to change mentally with how I approach everything is when there's some sort of persistent crashing issue, like the save crashes that are happening with some people right now with TR or FOTR, or like something like that comes up every time. And the tool, like being told that, oh, this thing is happening sometimes, it doesn't mean it's easy to recreate. Sometimes an issue can impact like 1% of the population, but when the mod has 300 and I think almost 400,000 or over 400,000 people who play it or who have played it, 1% is still a lot of people, but that can still be very hard to recreate. So there have been entire weeks where I'll get nothing else done because I'm just sitting there ramming my head against some obscure bug trying to figure out what's going on. It's just not healthy. So I've kind of stopped some of that, but that's the hardest thing to do, where it's like you have nothing to go off of and you're trying to figure out which part of the game that you can't even really modify the core elements of is interacting poorly with something you've done, or if it's just like a base game bug popping up, or if there's some like hardware limitation you've run into, or a specific interaction of hardware with the game that you have nothing to really diagnose. That's the absolute worst part.
I'm reminded of the freeze bug that happened a while ago.
Which one?
More modern
Where
example.
we ran up against a wall 40 times, both Corey and I, just doing the same thing for 15 minutes over and over and over again.
Or good example, super laser crashing on some people's systems, or lightning, or a lot of the drawn beam stuff on certain hardware systems seems to be problematic. But like that is basically a hard-coded game function. So there's nothing we can do other than not use those sort of ability types, but there's not any other options for them.
Yeah. So Triton, is that the one where it was like if you had a fleet that I think Ranger found the issue with, where if you were moving around a fleet stack on the Galactic level that had above a certain amount of combat power, total combat power, that would freeze the game? Is that the one, or is that something else?
The freeze, yeah, it was. I think it was the AI trying to resolve a fight between two overstacked ones.
Yeah.
The combat power overflow.
Yeah, and it just ate your entire CPU when it happened.
Yep.
Otherwise known as why we sliced that by 10 for the calculation.
Yep. It's now
compared to 2.3.6. Well, yeah.
Like we have another couple of questions.
It doesn't currently POX. That was a suspected problem with something before. And then we changed away from the... Yeah, but anyways, yeah. There was a question from Connor a few times, who's asking, with Thrawn's Revenge, can my fighter line be impacted by planets? For example, in Era 7, I get prey birds due to lack of actual production. What happens if I get to Era 7 with still having planets? So part of this is about abstraction of the stories that era is meant to represent, or that leader regime is meant to represent now, where yes, technically you can get to to that era, or to Pelion being in charge with more of the galaxy, but we do want to have like some elements representing, oh, you've progressed or you haven't, and that's kind of what the Dark Empire being moved to a legitimacy reward, or legitimacy rewards in general, are meant to represent. You want to have some recognizable amount of, oh, this is based on the Hand of Thrawn duology, so you work some of those things in, even if the the reasons why some of the things may have been happening in the universe don't line up exactly. Because like the characters you'd have or wouldn't have are based also in universe on the fact that they've been reduced to that. But it makes sense to have those characters be part of Pellion's hero roster, regardless of how the campaign is going, because those are people that are now associated with him. And similarly with the fighters, even though that does come from like the Preybirds coming from backroom dealing between Disna or Dizra, not Disna, between Dizra and pirates, then whether you control the whole galaxy or not, having that kind of story beat or that reference in there is usually more valuable than not. Some of that stuff does get turned into like player choices, or like, oh, now I have the option of doing this because Dizra's here, and a few more things might get worked into that kind of way. But there'll always be a bit of a trade-off between representing the story as it was told, representing the story for the reasons it occurred in the story, so that kind of element, and just basic gameplay stuff.
A great example of that is the shielded or unshielded fighter toggle for EA.
Other questions popping up. Let's see. Puerto covered the Vong. Boarding related save corruption. We don't think it's actually boarding related. We don't know what causes it, and hopefully it will go away in 0.3.
Yeah, like boarding was the assumption, was a possible guess because it was a new type of plugin. Like it uses the way our Galactic framework works is there are different plugins you can use. There are some that are tactical, some that are Galactic, and some that are called game scoring plugins, which is mostly how you get information between Galactic and tactical. So it was theorized as that is a new thing. Like maybe that's impacting it, and because that was mentioned as a possibility where like asked people if they'd been using boarding a lot for the saves that came up, people took that to mean, oh, it's boarding related. But that was just an exploratory maybe. Like I might do a hotfix trying to disable boarding to see if that changes anything. But while most of the reports in the thread on Steam are New Republic saves, there are also plenty of reports elsewhere that are not New Republic or Hapen or even Empire Era 2. And there are also some Fall of the Republic reports, much more rare now, but they were very common close to release. And Fall of the Republic doesn't have boarding at all. So it's unlikely that that's what it is.
I still think it has something to do with people launching sub mods and then forgetting they've launched the sub mod.
That was some of them, but that wasn't all of them. There are some that we know for sure weren't that. And we have, so like there's a debug build of the game that Petroglyph released that we can use to load, and then we can load the saves, and then it crashes and it gives us an error. So we have a kind of log telling us what part of the problem is, because it's consistent in the error it gives for that, but there's also no real way to know what that means beyond what it says or how that's happening. So even though we have a little bit of information, we don't have enough information to really do anything with it.
Philip asks, the ship I keep asking about every 3 months is the Devastation. I hope I haven't been annoying about that. The Devastation will maybe get done depending on whoever does the Malevolence, if they want to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely on our radar, but
it's a valid ship, so no need to worry about being annoying. So you're not.
Yeah. I'll do a couple of quick fire ones. Will Dino vehicles have the Jurassic Park Jeep colors? You know they will. Guys, you made the AI smarter. Now I find the game too difficult. Lol. You're welcome. I recommend easy difficulty, because that really, if you're having a lot of trouble with easy difficulty, then you probably want to try some smaller GCs on easy, and then work your way up to larger ones.
Yeah, at that point, there is a certain level of like just basic game knowledge that'll really help with playing, like beyond just, oh, the AI is too smart or whatever. And going to a map like the Thrawn campaign or some of the smaller historicals in Fall of the Republic will tend to be a bit easier for you before going into any of the TR progressive maps, especially with a ton of factions, a ton of units everywhere.
Yep, and all the resources and stuff. It's really good to just sit down and take your time with a smaller GC and pay attention to what's happening. Revenant asked, with the unknown regions, will there be some sort of diplomacy system between Chiss, Ascendancy, and Empire of the Hand?
Not really.
Sorry.
You can't really have any kind of true diplomacy in Empire at War. We ideally want the Chiss and the Empire of the Hand to be allied. But I've talked about this a bunch before, but there are a lot of issues you have to solve to use anything looking like true alliances with it. Because if you have two factions that are aligned, then a lot of what players would think you could do or would want to do with that is have like joint defense of a planet. But if you have two factions owning units over a planet, that breaks the game. So one of the things we need to do for that, to still allow like not attacking each other, moving through each other's territory, is a way for us to detect when a planet is occupied by multiple factions and to kick them off or donate the units as appropriate. But checking for that every second would be, or every frame would be, incredibly expensive. So then it becomes weighing the performance impact versus the gameplay impact. Like the way we do it in Fall of the Republic with the corruption stuff, it has its own issues, but one of the main issues with it is you can only use one set of factions for it, because like corruption is just corruption. So you can't say, oh, this faction and this faction use this type of corruption, and this faction use this other type of corruption. It's all one thing. So if we have to resort to that as how the Chiss and Empire of the Hand are allied, then we may, but it also means you can never have a situation where they're not allied like that. Like you can't really turn it off. So I'd prefer to work it out the other way and have potential for inter-blue people conflict.
And Thunder Thighs asks, yo, which faction is a big old juggernaut-looking tank going to? That's the A5RX. That's
Zero
Fall of the Republic. Republic, right?
Also Zero Command.
Zero Command.
Zero Command. Right. Yes, good old.
Well, it's not that big.
Yeah.
Well,
there's two arguable sizes for it, but I think the Battlefronts where it exists and kind of suggests the smaller size, which would be the comic one as well, where it's not quite a full juggernaut cockpit. Philo, what size did you go for?
I think at the moment it's Juggernaut cockpit, so just the same. But then it's still smaller than a normal Juggernaut because it's still only about 2/3 the length.
It's something we can play around with, being the point.
Definitely.
We haven't really figured the unit out yet.
Grand Admiral Mithrono Odo asked, will you be able to keep Thrawn as a hero if you go Dark Empire and Thrawn is still alive?
We'll get to a bit more of how Dark Empire works in its own thing once more of it's fleshed out. But it is not a typical regime, I will say. So Dark Empire tends to go on top of whatever your other leadership is. So Palpatine coming in, he's like the one dude who most of the Imperial leaders ended up saying, okay, it's probably fair that he's in charge instead of me. So that applies to your Warlord leadership or the Imperial leadership. So you can generally expect that you can have any of the other hero sets plus Palpatine on top of that.
Except Karnor.
He does object to Palpatine a bit, but he's also still a Royal Guard, so...
And I'm going to upset Nolan with this question. Corvettes and capital ships are in a good spot right now, but frigates feel a bit weak. Why is it just me, or do you agree?
We do not agree with that assessment generally.
Well,
frigates are very strong.
Define frigate.
Right, yes. I assume they mean everything in between an ISD and a Corvette, which
Or
is a wide
stuff
range.
that has hard points but is less than like a VSD or ISD. Depends what they mean.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally say go play the Hapens with
Well-
a tender or two and see how that feels.
Or
That's what I would
Maldrude with
recommend.
any setup.
Yeah.
Plus tenders.
I think we definitely disagree about frigates being too weak. If anything,
think-
they may even be too strong right now.
It probably depends on which ship you're using and how you're using them.
Also, again, what you're counting as a frigate, because mod term frigate isn't like that's larger than strike cruiser stuff, which doesn't really apply to any of the Haven things by the hardpoint cutoff rules.
And as much as we kind of mention tenders as the obvious thing that can make them even more powerful, even if you
it was
remove
never an
that
issue in the first place.
even if you remove that factor, you're going to get more out of smaller ships in almost any situation than larger ships when you have appropriate micro. Just because of the way you can target. Less out of
it's something that
tanking.
just was brought up is that we could probably improve the specific heavy frigate armor rating a bit more, but that's a fairly minor.
Yeah.
I'm going to point out here that it's Empire War, which is not the best game for any sort of sense, and that with 300 units plus fighters plus ground stuff, nobody's going to agree on shit in the first place. Just look at Reddit or look at Steam, and it's like, this sucks. No, this is good, and you'll see the same. You won't see two people agree more often than yeah.
There's a couple of questions about the Assault Frigate Mark II, asking where it's going to go and how it's changing from base game. I don't think we have strong answers for that right now.
Yeah, that kind of just gets back to the initial thing from the initial video of the New Republic's roster. You'll have more ways that those change, both as different types of progression happen with research, different like player choices that can impact what your roster looks like at different points. So it'll fit into that. The actual stats, wait and see.
And a question about the Galaxy gun. Will it be possible to put it in TR? I think that's something we eventually plan to do, but we want to be really careful about how we handle any kind of super weapon.
Yes. Planet destruction will tie into things like influence and all that. So there are limiting factors on it now rather than just the kind of end game Empire at War, Death Star, destroy every planet situation.
Yep.
There's a few questions about future ISD types. We don't plan to make our own ISD 3 type. That, if you want to think of the Mon Mothma ISD type as an ISD 3, you kind of can. You want to think
the
of
only other like actual variant there that we'd use would be the Anakin Solo.
Yeah.
Or FGCW style blocks for that setup.
And
like the hero and then like the standard sort of base that it's implied that we see with the Commandorian one and whatnot. But
yeah. And there's a few like the turbulence and that kind of thing, but we're often this question comes with like, oh, are you going to throw in these other fan-in types? And usually the answer to that is no. There's the submod content that Oz and Porto are working on with the Fractal Sponge designs, but that's as far as that'll go.
It looks like that's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think this might
So
be a new record for the porn bots. Was that 6 now?
Yeah, something like that.
They used to. I need a better way to phrase this. They used to come hard and fast in larger groups.
Oh my god! What was what was the worst way?
I couldn't think of a better way to do it, so I just went with my initial thought. But like, they used to just come. They'd do like 100. Shut the. They used to do like 100 messages at once, and there'd be 10 in a row. So they've actually calmed down over the years. But
we need to take that clip and put the cyberpunk music to it. They usually come.
But yeah, so I think that's all for now.
Someone asked about Rebels content and IR.
Safe bet.
Yeah. I think just what we said before, probably canon GCs and Legends GCs. You can expect canon stuff in the canon ones. Voila.
I think we have like the start of a ghost model somewhere.
Yes, it's complicated, but yes,
it's complicated. Speaking of IR, there's a Braha talk. But all right, yeah. Well, thanks again, everyone watching. Very appreciated for all the support throughout the last 16 years, and especially thank you, team, for making this worth doing with all the fun we have and all the very peaceful discussions we always have on all content.
Let's just say there's a reason the Hapens were delayed.
But it finally happened.